Austin, and now they are in mourning. But they did share some of their thoughts tonight, and Channel 8's Don Wall joins us now. More with that from our newsroom. Don?
Gloria, Jason Dahl was a veteran pilot committed to safe flying. Tonight, his family members believe he may have deliberately crashed his plane in a field to prevent hijackers from reaching their target. When United Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco, carrying 45 people, crashed in a field southeast of Pittsburgh, the family of Jason Dahl in Austin had no idea that he was one of the pilots.
My baby brother.
And so then I just said, "Oh my God, was it Jason?" And he said yes. So I then called, well, I was in a cubicle, and I don't even remember what I started saying, but my God, I think, oh my God. And, you know, people came, and somebody called my husband. And
I received a call from my wife's work, not her directly, but one of her co-workers called me. And that's when the realization kind of hit in that this was more than someone else's problem or someone else's disaster. It's mine now.
43-year-old Jason Dahl was a United pilot for 17 years. His family believed he may have intentionally crashed in a field to avoid flying into another terrorist target.
I can see him trying to ditch the plane if he thought that it was if he was being ordered to fly it into a building or fly it. And our understanding is that they were telling the pilots what was going on, and so we think that that's a possibility.
We get to wondering how humans can do this to other humans so unemotionally. It's just a crazy world we live in, I guess.
The family expressed how difficult it is to mourn for their loved one, knowing so many others have also died.
I lost a brother and a real
City leaders and the FBI held a joint news conference to answer those concerns. And Channel 8's Jeff Brady joins us now live from the FBI offices in downtown Dallas. Jeff?
John and Gloria, the FBI agents and civic leaders who gathered here today for this news conference wanted to remind all North Texans that not only have they imagined how to respond in the event of a terrorist attack or a similar crisis in North Texas, they've planned for it. And although none of them were ready to suggest that Dallas could prevent a similar attack here in the city, they all seemed certain that the city could handle any emergency with the proper coordination. And as the mayor reminded us, some people could possibly even save lives with a coordinated blood drive, as some citizens have already joined today.
You can't plan for all the contingencies, but if I can remind all of you, a few months ago we were planning for Y2K, and that planning has paid off.
Without question, I feel that we can respond to any incident because of the responses we have. We've trained with every one of the metropolitan agencies here. Dallas, Fort Worth, Plano, Metroplex. We were the first one with weapons of mass destruction exercises where we employed emergency medical services and the fire department. We were the first, and that started 2 years ago.
If there was anything that gave me some feeling of relief, of hope about our common humanity and common love for one another, it was literally seeing hundreds, if not 1,000 people lined up outside of Reunion Arena to do what we could do.
And what they could do was, of course, donate blood. And John and Gloria, FBI agents want to remind all North Texans tonight that what they can do is keep calling in tips and suggestions to this massive investigation. In fact, they've already set up a special voicemail hotline to record those tips and suggestions. That number's on your screen, 214-922-7796, the FBI hotline. They want to encourage everyone to continue to call in tips and suggestions, and they have promised to follow every single one of them, no matter where it leads. Reporting live from the FBI headquarters in downtown Dallas, John and Gloria, back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Jeff. The cities of Dallas and Fort Worth both stepped up security today in the wake of the attacks.
Channel 8's Scott Sams joins us now with more on that part of the story. Scott?
John, Gloria, I'm up here on the roof of Channel 8 because I was going to talk to you about a couple of stories. And before I do that, I want to tell you something I haven't seen since I was a kid. I saw 2 fighter jets fly from the west across the Trinity River area, all the way across the convention center to the east. I got to tell you the truth, it startled me. because we haven't seen anything in the sky here except birds. Now, as you would imagine, with the attacks in New York City and in Washington, people were concerned about what could happen here because nobody really knew what would be next in this tragedy. People really especially affected, people in those buildings right there, the skyscrapers. Janet St. James is joining us today to talk to us about that. Janet?
Scott, this is normally the thick of rush hour, and this intersection behind me should be bumper-to-bumper traffic, but you can see from here all the way down the street, there's only a couple of cars here, and that's because in the skyscrapers up above, workers were either told they were either evacuated or told that if they felt uncomfortable, they could leave.
Thousands of people herded out of high-rises and fled the city as the terrorist attacks brought daily activities to a virtual halt in downtown Dallas.
Just getting out of here. Getting out of here while I still can.
The federal buildings, previous targets for threats, were amongst the first to be closed. Workers were urged to get their things and go.
Just leave the building right now.
At the same time, the local World Trade Center shut down.
With the name of the World Trade Center, we certainly don't want to take any chances in some lunatic wants to attach their name to this building.
Bank One, Renaissance Towers, and the 70-story Bank of America Plaza all evacuated as employees became very aware of their offices high in the sky.
We felt nervous in the building.
A lot of people were already ready to go, like, before they even put the word down. A lot of people just didn't feel comfortable at work.
Ambulances responded to calls of people injured in the rush to get out. Streets were gridlocked. To handle the sudden press of people, DART added extra trains and buses. Overhead, a police helicopter circled to make sure crowds remained calm. Overall, evacuations were safe and smooth. Within a few hours, Dallas streets normally bustling with activity were eerily deserted.
And Dallas may well be empty tomorrow as well, may look a lot like this. That's because many of the office buildings that closed today haven't announced when they'll be open again. So if you have an appointment in downtown Dallas, work in one of these office buildings, or have a court date, you should certainly call in advance to make sure that that building will be open. This is Janet St. James reporting live from Dallas. Scott, back to you.
Janet, thank you very much. Now, in Fort Worth, there weren't any evacuations from any high-rise buildings there, but city leaders did take the first step in planning for a potential disaster. As a matter of fact, the Emergency Operations Center under City Hall was opened this morning. It was put on what they call Level 2 alert. The highest alert would be at Level 5, reserved for disasters like the Fort Worth tornado last year. This means that police and fire departments are standing by, ready for any potential action.
So there's a heightened awareness and a physical presence that we want to project across the city.
Should anything happen that makes us be concerned, we're in a position to respond very quickly.
Now, later this afternoon, Fort Worth officials did return to a Level 1 alert, and that means that a small crew will stay overnight at the Emergency Operations Center. Now, while city offices did remain open in Fort Worth, the Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base did shut down after the attacks on Washington and New York today. The base in West Fort Worth near Ridgemar Mall was closed to most visitors, including retirees who usually come to shop for groceries and medicine there. Many of the non-essential employees were sent home. This base is home to reserve units for the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, and of course the Texas Guard. Fighter jets and big transport aircraft are based there, but a base official does not expect them to be called up. Once again, it was quite startling here to see those two fighter jets fly across from west to east. I think we're okay, though. John, Gloria?
Right. Thank you very much, Scott. In Austin today, Governor Rick Perry called for calm and offered the service of Texas troops to deal with the aftermath of the tragedy in New York.
Channel 8's Austin Bureau Chief Shelley Koffler joins us now with some details. Shelley?
Well, John, Governor Perry wanted to make it very clear today there are no known threats against the state of Texas. Nonetheless, security at many of the state buildings was tightened, and though most state offices remain... Okay, we want to break in right now. There is a White House briefing, so we are going to go to ABC News and listen to what they have to say.
Do your civic duty and assist us by donating blood. It is our primary job is to make sure Americans harmed by this tragedy get the help that they need. We will remain in constant contact with the governors, the mayors, public health officials, and other local officials to make sure that all their needs are being met. It is a sad day but America and all of its citizens certainly share tonight in the grief that has been caused. And as the President and everybody in his administration have said, we, the government, will continue to operate and continue to provide the services to all Americans.
Well, it is important for the country. This is, let's just come away from the White House for just a moment, for a second now, and just inadvertently, we get from, it's so important at this point to hear from the representatives of government. Here are the leaders of the Senate and the House of Representatives together. The Speaker of the House in the middle, Dennis Hastert, Tom Daschle, the Senate leader, to his left.
At a time like this, no words that we should utter today or this evening can help the hearts and souls and feelings of the victims and the families that were a part of this great tragedy that happened in this country today. Our prayers and thoughts and words of consolation goes out to all those who have suffered. But one thing that happens here in this place is when American suffers and when people perpetrate acts against this country, we as a Congress and as a government stand united, and we stand together. Senators and House members, Democrats and Republicans will stand shoulder to shoulder to fight this evil that's been perpetrated on this nation. We will stand together to make sure that those who have brought forth this evil deed will pay the price. We're not sure who this is yet. But we have our suspicions. And when that is justified and when those suspicions are justified, we will act. We will stand with the President, we will stand with this government, and we will stand as Americans together through this time. Thank you.
Applause on the politicians for one another, almost willing themselves to stand shoulder to shoulder in a nonpartisan way. This is Tom Daschle, the Democratic leader of the Senate.
Despicable acts were an assault on our people and on our freedom. As the representatives of the people, we are here to declare that our resolve has not been weakened by these horrific and cowardly acts. Congress will convene tomorrow. And we will speak with one voice to condemn these attacks, to comfort the victims and their families, to commit our full support to the effort to bring those responsible to justice. We, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, stand strongly united behind the President and will work together to ensure that the full resources of the government are brought to bear in these efforts. Our heartfelt thoughts and our fervent prayers are with the injured and the families of those who have been lost.
We know as a nation, as we said, our thoughts and prayers are with those families and those injured and those who are the casualties of today's attack. We also remember those thousands of people who are rescue workers. We ask now that we all bow our heads in a moment of silence and remembrance. Thank you.
So, brief remarks from the political leadership, both Republican and Democrat, on the Hill today, and many members of Congress, both the House and the Senate, including Senator Lott just leaving the camera, I think hugging Barbara Mikulski, Democratic.
Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean, wide with home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Well, I do not know whether that was a spontaneous gesture, but whether it was or was not, to see members of the House and the Senate, men and women, hugging each other in the face of this attack on the country, standing together on the steps of the Capitol on the evening of the 11th day of the month, 9th month of the year, singing God Bless America, surely reflects some heartfelt attempt by the members of the Congress to say to the world that this is a unified nation in the face of tragedy, as it has, for the most part, always been thus. A couple of very important numbers and website things have just been talked about by former Senator John Ashcroft, now the head of the Justice Department, the Attorney General of the United States. And I want to just read them out a little, one more time slowly, because they're important. The first, as the Justice Department in general and all of the intelligence agencies led by the FBI in this case begin to troll for information as to who may have perpetrated these acts of terror and horror, the Attorney General offers a website. If you have a pencil or a pen, it's www.ifccfbi.gov. As I expected someone to make a graphic. Thank you very much. And this is a telephone number coming now, which I think many people in the country will have been desperate to hear. It's the first time we've heard it today. This is a victims of crime hotline, which the government has established, and it is 1-800-331-0075. 1-800-331-0075. And this is particularly for people who may have had family, primarily for family.
There again, we heard from congressional leaders, House Speaker Dennis Hastert and House Majority Leader Tom Daschle.
Again, in Austin today, Governor Perry is talking about calm and the need for offering the service of Texas troops to deal with the aftermath of the tragedy in New York. Our Austin Bureau Chief Shelley Koff is joining us again now with details. Shelley?
Well, John, as we were saying, the governor today wanted to make it very clear that there are no known threats against the state of Texas. Nonetheless, security at many of the state buildings was tightened today, and though most state offices remained open, the governor gave state employees the option of going home.
For those employees who are uncomfortable being wherever they may be, are certainly free to be with their families to go home. We have no indications from DPS, FBI, or from any other government agency that there is a threat to any state employee or, for that matter, for anyone in the state.
Following the governor's reassurance that state buildings were not in danger, most remained open. One exception, the state comptroller's office, which barred the doors and dismissed workers. In the State Railroad Commission, worker Tommy Maldonado said he is fearful and wanted to leave, but wasn't offered the opportunity.
If they would have let us go home, it would be a whole lot better. You know, I got family, just like everybody else does, you know. And it can happen here, anywhere.
While flags at state buildings were lowered to half staff, the Department of Public Safety increased security. Troopers blocked vehicles from entering the state capitol. The state's National Guard headquarters at Camp Mabry set up checkpoints. The Guard said armories across the state are taking special precautions.
We think that what happened this morning, it's targeted at perhaps military installations due to the fact that they did hit the Pentagon.
The Texas National Guard may be called upon to provide troops for security or rescue in the aftermath of this tragedy. Governor Perry says he called New York's Governor, George Pataki, and offered the Guard's services.
General James has been called. He is on notice that there could be a call for National Guard troops in some form or fashion. He is ready to offer whatever assistance, whenever and wherever.
Among the troops, civilian troops that might be sent, is an urban search and rescue team that is based at Texas A&M. It is called Texas Task Force 1. It is operated under the auspices of FEMA. It's a team of about 62 doctors, search and communication specialists, and engineers. It is one of only 6 response teams in the country, and we are told at this hour it is on alert, prepared to travel to the East Coast if the services are needed. Reporting live in Austin, I'm Shelley Koffler. Gloria and John, back to you.
All right, Shelley, thanks a lot. Today's attacks have led most security experts to believe that they are the work of Islamic militants.
Locally, that has many people questioning the recent FBI raid of a Richardson business, which has ties to a Muslim organization known as the Holy Land Foundation. Channel 8's Valerie Williams joins us now live from our Dallas newsroom with more on that. Valerie?
Well, Gloria, there are very strong denials coming from officials at both the Holy Land Foundation and an internet company known as Infocom. Now, last Wednesday, a federal terrorism task force swooped in and raided Infocom's offices, which happened to sit directly across the street from the Holy Land Foundation's offices. Now, the foundation has been under investigation since 1999 by the State Department for alleged ties to the terrorist organization Hamas. Ties they deny exist.
More than 80 officers from the FBI, the Customs Service, INS, and other police agencies were involved in the operation. It was the largest raid in the task force's 6-year history. According to the company's attorney, agents carted off lots of information from computer hard drives. This morning, Infocom's CEO emphasized that he was as horrified as anyone by the attacks.
I'm shocked. That's all I can say. I'm shocked.
Is there any coincidence between the raid that took place last week and what happened today?
No.
Interestingly, as many workers fled for home today, Infocom's employees needed to stay. They remained, even though the company and the Holy Land Foundation across the street had received threatening calls and no less than 5 police units patrolled out front. One of the company's main services is to provide internet systems to clients here and abroad, and because of the crisis, they were unusually busy. The Holy Land Foundation opted to send some workers home.
We're a humanitarian organization, and that's it. We care for human life, and we're deeply disturbed at today's events.
Infocom is tied to the foundation because Basman Alashi's brother is one of the foundation's founders. Although the Holy Land Foundation has been under scrutiny by the FBI for years, there have never been any charges filed against the organization or its employees. The foundation and Infocom received surprising support from unusual quarters this afternoon. An Israeli terrorism expert on tour through Dallas said he believed last week's raid had nothing to do with the terrorist assaults of today.
Because I don't think you can carry out what happened today without very careful and extensive planning. It takes, in my opinion, weeks for such an operation to take place. So I doubt it very much if you can pull out such a thing so quickly after the raid in Dallas.
Now, we want to make it very clear that Professor Litvak does question the foundation's financial ties with Hamas, but not even he would speculate as to who was involved in the attack on the World Trade Center or the Pentagon today. Obviously, a big concern for officials at the foundation and also at Infocom is that someone may decide to retaliate and target their organizations. Back to you, John and Gloria.
All right. Thank you very much, Valerie. And today's massive Devastation and loss of life are hauntingly familiar to members of the Dallas area Jewish community.
And tonight, they're uniting through prayer. Channel 8's Cynthia Vega joins us now live with more on that. Cynthia?
John, while talking to them today, first and foremost, many of them expressed their sympathy for the victims and their families. But others are in fact comparing the magnitude of today's devastation to the long-term plight of the Israelis in the face of the Palestinians. Back here in Dallas at the Temple Emmanuel, Senior Rabbi David Stern says he's trying to help those who feel powerless find strength in the wake of this indescribable disaster. Some, he says, need help simply talking to their kids about it. Others he's encouraging to reach out to one another while calling on their faith to see them through. As a rabbi and a Jew, Stern says he feels deeply connected to what's happened today.
Certainly this sense of vulnerability, certainly this sense of terror striking when you don't know what corner it's going to come from next, is something that unfortunately we have some experience in. And so in some ways I feel like this hits us twice.
Rabbi Stern also says he believes the worst of this tragedy has yet to come as today's images of devastation become news of the death toll tomorrow. Rabbi Stern also wanted to add that this week's prayer service will be held on schedule this Friday night. He believes that's a pivotal time when people will need to come together simply to cope. Live in Dallas, I'm Cynthia Vega. Back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Cynthia. The North Texas Red Cross is the information headquarters for all calls concerning the attack on America.
What you have, Sharon? Zerma Williams worked for the Pentagon, and she came home. That's it. She came home. Active forms.
The calls from people looking for loved ones in New York and Washington, D.C. are being routed through Dallas. The local Red Cross has called in 200 volunteers to handle them. The volunteers are poised to leave for New York when flights resume. Meanwhile, they're doing their best to track down survivors and pass along good news to worried loved ones.
If they need to get a hold of an immediate family member, son, daughter, grandparent, mother, that type of relation, to have the name ready, the person's address, if they can, the social security number, any information that they have that they can give us is going to help us find that person.
Officials are asking for patience, saying it could take 72 hours to track down the information. And they are asking for bilingual volunteers, especially those who speak Asian languages, to call their toll-free number. It's 1-800-HELP-NOW. A call for blood has gone out across America and here in Dallas.
Channel 8's Macy Jepson joins us now with more from Reunion Arena, where a massive blood drive is underway right now. Macy?
Gloria, it took a national tragedy to bring Reunion Arena back into the spotlight, and what you see behind me is it has to be absolutely the only piece of good news that has come out of today's tragedy. People are donating blood by the droves. 1,500 people today will donate blood to help save lives in New York and in Washington, D.C. On this day, Reunion Arena serves as the base for life-saving measures.
And that's the problem. Our society is too open.
As the line of potential blood donors wrapped around the arena and out of sight, there was time for North Texans to digest the magnitude of this tragedy.
I just feel helpless and want to do something. I mean, there's not anything else I can think to do. It was sort of going up to New York and, you know, trying to do something up there. So I just wanted to do whatever I could.
And to lay blame on yet-to-be-named terrorists. America's pride is hurting in Dallas, Texas. Mayor Ron Kirk was in the line to donate.
Probably as close to Pearl Harbor as anything we've seen. And I mean, we see this as a declaration of war. And I think we will heed the words of President Bush. We are obviously going to be in prayer for the families of lives lost, but supportive of our nation.
I think we should burn the rats out of their nest. We have to use whatever military force necessary, and the President's got all that available at his command.
Many stopped by after being sent home from their jobs. Others searched out the information, knowing this would be their only way to help.
I was waiting for information on whether they were going to do the blood drive, and I decided to come straight here.
What gives you that civic mindedness?
It's just what I do.
Carter Blood Care is part of a network that provides half the nation's blood supply. Its entire staff answered the call to man all 13 blood centers in the Dallas area, and the blood will be ready in 24 hours or when flights to New York resume.
This is a very trying time. This is a horrible tragedy that is affecting so many people, yet giving blood is something that you can do personally. That's a positive reaction.
Your opportunity to donate has not passed. Reunion Arena will be open until 8 o'clock tonight, and tomorrow the Carter Blood Care Centers, 13 centers around the Dallas area, will be open from 8 o'clock until 8 o'clock at night. Also from 11 o'clock until 8 o'clock tomorrow night, Will Rogers Coliseum and Amon Carter Exhibit Hall, those areas together will offer blood donations. So you can make a difference, and if you'd like to get some information also on the criteria for donating blood, you can go to the Carter Blood Care website at carterbloodcare.org, or you can call 1-800-DONATE-4. That is donate with the number 4. It is not too late to make a difference. This is possibly the only good news that could come out of such a tragedy, and this blood will go straight to New York to save lives. I'm Macy Jepson reporting live from Reunion Arena. Back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Macy. Now, recapping the day's events. There's still no word on how many people were hurt or killed in the apparent terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. 2 hijacked airliners crashed into the Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan this morning. Both buildings eventually collapsed.
Some 50,000 people work in the 2 towers at any given time. And while evacuations began immediately after the first crash, thousands of people are feared dead. Among the witnesses to the terrifying event are Texans who happened to be in Lower Manhattan this morning at the time of the attacks. Channel 8's Don Wall has more.
Texas native Eric Cavazos was on the 14th floor of the building right next to the Twin Towers when the plane struck.
Everybody was just going crazy. Cars were on fire. People were still running around, and they were putting white blankets all over the roads. My reaction is I'm thinking about moving back to Texas.
A few blocks away, Dallas psychologist David Zellman watched as people escaped from the financial district.
People are on the streets walking home through Manhattan, so you have tens of thousands of people walking fairly quietly. You can't go a block without seeing people who are fairly hysterical, and you come to realize that almost everybody here knows somebody who works in the financial district.
Being a psychologist, Dr. Zellman was quick to sense a serious mood change.
There's a certain sense of, defiance here. I mean, people are so angry. I mean, the anger is palatable.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you just can see it. You look at each other and, you just see the anger in people's faces. People aren't screaming. It's a quiet anger, but it's there.
Dave Lopez runs a sales and marketing company between Dallas and New York. He watched from the Triborough Bridge in a cab on his way to LaGuardia Airport.
It looked like a tornado was surrounding the building, just like this billowing cloud surrounding the whole building. It was surreal. I have to tell you, it's the most surreal thing I've ever seen. And I just said, I can't believe this has happened in New York. And it's like we just started crying.
Lopez says New Yorkers are pulling for each other.
The way New Yorkers got together and tried to help each other, and the amazing, helpful attitude. No cars were honking horns when we were stuck.
The Texans in New York say they are sad, angry, and determined that New York will recover. Don Wall, Channel 8 News.
The number of casualties at the Pentagon is mounting. At least 100 people were killed or injured when a third hijacked plane crashed into the building's west wall.
Not since the Civil War has Washington, D.C. been directly threatened, and the last time a foreign power attacked the Capitol was the War of 1812. But today, the seat of American military power was hit by a hijacked jetliner, and dark smoke poured into the skies over the Potomac River. Washington correspondent Jim Fry was on the streets of the Capitol, and he joins us now live from the Pentagon.
Jim?
Well, Gloria and John, more than 10 hours after the crash, dusk is falling over the Pentagon, and as you can tell, large portions of the building are still smoldering. In the last half hour, we have seen flames break out on the roofs of some of the inner rings of the Pentagon. In the past, when there have been attacks on Washington that you mentioned, there were generals and armies. Today, it was an unseen enemy who struck here, and other government employees across the river learned of it about the time they would have been getting their first cups of coffee. At the Pentagon, this sunny day began in fire and smoke.
And I suddenly heard a shot, sounded like a missile coming in, and then it went bam, and the whole building shook.
But for much of Washington, It was sirens in traffic, or standing outside buildings, or the radio.
We've all been evacuated. There was a state of alert throughout the city of Washington.
And the rush hour migration reversed. In a confusion of police and traffic and noise, the streets were filled with emergency vehicles going who knows where, feeding the worry in a generally orderly retreat.
They told us that was going to be some administrative leave. That, you know, we're trying to get back to the FAA to see what's going on there.
Okay, see you, all right.
The U.S. government was shut down, the Capitol taped off. Even pedestrians were restricted. Secret Service officers patrolled outside the Treasury, weapons drawn. People lingered for hours, feeding on rumors.
Did you hear it? It was about a half hour ago. You could hear boom.
Executive building I heard blew up.
That was not true, but as dark smoke billowed above the tidal basin, one visitor expressed the sense of unease.
To see that this kind of thing can go on, it's like we definitely need to build up more defense. I can't imagine that someone could get that close to the Pentagon.
A senator.
This is a very, very serious attack. This is an attack on the United States. Not since Pearl Harbor has there been an attack on the United States like this.
Hours passed and stranded workers waited. An Oxford professor lay in the grass. A Labor Department statistician still worked and worried about putting people on the street.
And it sort of leaves all kinds of other juicy targets. So.
Here at the Pentagon, it was an American Airlines jet with 64 people on board that slammed into the building. The Pentagon, one number has indicated 100 people are dead inside that building, although the Defense Secretary Rumsfeld would not put a number on it just a few minutes ago in a briefing. There's one congressman who's very familiar with Pentagon says that this portion of the building, they were just finishing renovation and not everybody had moved back in, so perhaps that's fortunate. As far as others in Washington, D.C., most of them were lucky. About the worst they had to do was wait and worry about the safety of others. On the streets today, we didn't see much panic or even much fear on the faces of people. There was a lot of befuddlement and some confusion as Washington came under attack for the first time in well over a century. Gloria and John.
All right, thank you very much. Jim Fry reporting from the Pentagon. North Texas lawmakers expressed shock and anger at the attack and urged Americans to rally behind the president.
Congressman Joe Barton said the attack reminds us all of how vulnerable we are to terrorism.
It shows that in an open society, no matter how secure we think we are, we're always subject to a coordinated terrorist attack. But it also shows, I think, that we will prevail. The president's safe, the Congress is safe.
Now, Barton says he is willing to vote to take whatever military action is necessary to bring the perpetrators to justice. The U.S. House and Senate plan to convene tomorrow, they plan to convene tomorrow morning to pass resolutions condemning the attack.
Some lawmakers say it's important to get back to work quickly to show Americans and the world that the country remains strong.
Now, Calvin Gilson's a political science professor at SMU. He joins us now live to talk about how lawmakers are likely to react to the attacks. President Bush, of course, is going to speak tonight at 7:30. That's an important speech for him.
It's a very important speech because throughout the day, we've wondered where he is. His security people were very concerned that as part of this whole coordinated set of attacks that the president could be targeted. So they took him to Louisiana and then in Nebraska, but now he's back in Washington and will address the American people. And people need to see him and hear from him and see that steel in his backbone, that glint in his eye that suggests that he's in charge of our response.
Well, certainly we've heard what some congressional leaders have said just moments before you joined us here. So what can they do to help along in this crisis?
Well, what they can do is demonstrate that they're on the job and that the government is functioning, but the president doesn't need additional authority. There aren't going to be any votes necessary for the president to respond because we've been attacked, and as commander-in-chief, he can marshal the nation's assets and respond when we know who to respond against.
Now, you know, there has been this discussion about how to respond, whether or not it should be a military strike. Should we renew the policy of possible assassinations and that sort of thing? That would require legislation, would it not?
That would require
some kind of a change.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a presidential order in place that forbids the United States to engage in attacks on individuals, assassinations, like the Israelis will sometimes do when someone is a declared enemy of the Israeli state and up to mischief and they can find him, they will take him out. So as a democracy, we're going to be engaged in a very long conversation about how we respond in ways that leave us democratic and open and the country that we have been to this point, but still respond in ways that protect our nation.
And certainly enjoy the freedoms that so many have fought for.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks a lot, Professor Jillison. And well, tonight the nation's airports are closed for the first time ever. Shortly after the attacks in New York, the FAA grounded all commercial flights, including all flights in and out of DFW Airport. Airplanes already in the air were ordered to land at the nearest airport. Instead of boarding flights, stranded passengers stared at TV monitors in disbelief. Many tried to rent cars or return to their hotel rooms. The FAA ban will remain in effect until noon tomorrow at the earliest. Flights at Dallas Love Field also came to an abrupt halt today.
Channel 8's Bill Brown joins us with the latest on the situation out at Love Field. Bill?
John, this has a very strange and unreal feel to it. Take a look at this. Normally a busy, bustling Love Field in the evening is virtually deserted. It's a stark picture, sobering evidence of something terrible that reached all the way across this nation today and has shaken every one of us. Pulling up at this airport, the first sign that things aren't normal, a police car blocking the passenger drop-off area. The next sign, the quiet, the amazing quiet. There's not the whine of a single airplane engine. Southwest Airlines 737s are all lined up, parked at the gates. There are not enough gates, so some of the planes had to be parked out in the ramp areas. Inside, hundreds of passengers were scrambling, with all of the flights canceled, trying to figure out what to do. Irma Gertler of Dallas was on an American Airlines plane flying to LaGuardia Airport in New York. Suddenly, she said, the pilot turned the plane around and headed back to Love Field.
The pilot got on the radio and told us of the disaster and that we would be turning around and coming back to Dallas, that there would be no flights at all into New York.
How did the people react to the news?
There was stunned silence. I'm shaking. I'm grateful, very grateful.
People crowded around television sets and watched in stunned disbelief. Officers evacuated the entire gate concourse and ordered everybody out. Can we go in?
Nope.
Close. How come?
Close. Close.
Are you evacuating everybody?
Yes. No one's allowed to enter.
What are the crews and pilots doing?
They're all sitting in there. Waiting to hear too. Yeah, we know nothing.
So you don't know what's going on either?
No.
Like everybody else? Although filled with people, the terminal seemed almost hushed. People jammed the payphones as dozens suddenly stranded tried to rent cars. What do you do now? You can't get to New Orleans.
Wait till they say go back.
Frightening isn't the word for it. I mean, I can't believe that they could get and do the damage that they've done.
I was just checking in with my office back in Colchester, Vermont, letting them know that I was okay, I was safe.
Actually not going to have any flights today out of Dallas Love Field.
Besieged by people stranded far from home, Southwest ticket agents gave them vouchers so they could stay in local hotels. As people tried to cope with it all, many had the same feelings.
I can't believe it. I just can't believe it.
Just a few minutes ago over here, we saw Southwest employees moving 3 of the 737s away from near the main entrance to the terminal. They're moving them back to the north, and we don't really know why. It may be more of a protected area. The latest word is that Love Field will remain closed until at least noon tomorrow, but if you plan to try to fly, you really need to check that out. You need to call the airline and check it. Some people obviously may be afraid to fly tomorrow. We really don't know what's going to happen, but when flights do get back in the air, when the airline system starts up again, it's obviously safe to say the security will be much, much tighter. John and Gloria?
Thank you, Bill. Bill Brown reporting live from Dallas Love Field. Many religious communities plan special prayer services of their own this evening.
Channel 8's Ana Martinez joins us now live from a Baptist church in Oak Cliff with details. Ana?
Gloria, tragedy on this scale prompts many to take comfort in their faith. Some came here to the Grace Temple Baptist Church in Oak Cliff for a special noon service. There were special services and open-door policies at houses of worship around the area today. Thanksgiving Square, the bells that normally toll for peace and hope toll for sorrow this day. They ring in the middle of a downtown that at midday was far less busy than usual. But these women, all downtown employees, came to the non-denominational gathering spot to pray.
And we just want to come and pray for the family that lost lives, because it touches all of our lives.
We come to prayer every day, but today we feel like is needed much more than ever. Not only, I have family members that's in New York, and right now can't wait to get home to call and see how everyone's doing, but it's just a sense of urgency today.
It's really a wake-up call for all of us.
At Grace Temple Baptist Church, Pastor Mickey Moriarty held a special noon service at the request of upset congregation members.
And even in the face of bad things, we know that God's Word tells us that He's going to control everything.
We gather at a very dark moment in the life of our country.
Bishop Charles Grauman of the Catholic Diocese of Dallas offered a special mass at the downtown cathedral.
Banish violence from our midst and wipe away our tears.
The bishop and the congregation prayed for national healing.
We have to rally around our brothers and sisters who are suffering the brunt of all of this. So I tell people, you have to be open toward reaching out to others now.
People of all denominations gathered in houses of worship seeking solace.
When I saw it on TV, it was real shocking, and I'm at home alone right now because I'm unemployed, and well, this was a good place to come.
While there were many services today, there are also many more special services scheduled for tonight as well as tomorrow night. And of course, as the magnitude of this tragedy unfolds, there are likely going to be many more to come. John and Gloria, back to you.
Thank you very much, Anna. While so many people are puzzled by today's terrorist attacks, children perhaps are even more confused.
And that means parents could be fielding some pretty tough questions from their youngsters. Channel 8's Macy Jepson joins us live. She's got more on that. Macy?
Well, at this evening hour, I can imagine what it must be like on the home front. I would hope to think that parents have huddled their children around and given them a good collective hug, and that really does go a long way. But after that, you have to explain to them how this happens and how you heal. And joining us today is Dr. Brad Schwall. He is the director of Homeworks, which is a family enrichment program, and he is also a counselor, and he is here to give us some advice on that such thing. Brad, how in the world, what do we do? How do we begin to even explain to our children what has happened to our country?
It is so hard to explain. It's important with our kids to reassure them that we love them, that we are there to protect them. It's important to be open and honest about what has happened, focusing on facts and focusing on what you think is most essential for your children to know.
Is there any age that is not a good age to be so honest?
It's important to use your discretion, be responsible about how you describe what has happened. Younger children are not going to be aware of what has happened or understand, but as kids are older, they may have questions about why something like this would happen. They may have questions about their own safety. So it's important to be responsible and to be attentive to your own child and what they are experiencing.
And these children are obviously at a certain age going to be drawn to the television sets, and they're going to want to watch this, and it is so devastating to see. What is your advice to parents as they handle that?
Be available, be present. It's important to help them process what they are seeing. It's also important to be responsible and use discretion in what they are exposed to. Being exposed to traumatic events like this affects us all emotionally, so it is very important to be responsible about what our children are exposed to.
Thank you for the advice, Dr. Brad Schwall. We appreciate it, and in the night with a hug and a kiss, that can never hurt. I'm Macy Jepson reporting live. Back to you.
All right, Macy, we've seen North Texans step up to donate blood today, but others may want to do more.
Channel 8's Troy Dungan joins us now live with details of a special relief effort. Troy?
There is another way you can help with your pocketbook. Please consider this. Our parent company, the Belo Corporation, has set up through the Belo News Organizations in Texas something called the Spirit of America Relief Fund. You've heard us talk about the Spirit of Texas for many years and about family first. This is the American family we're talking about now, and you can help. We've set up a special fund where you can donate directly through the American Red Cross, and your funds will go directly to the victims and the survivors and families of this tragedy in New York and Washington, D.C. Tomorrow, go to any Texas J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. You go in there and write a check to the American Red Cross, DR789. We'll be repeating that again. American Red Cross DR789. That'll get your money directly to the Red Cross so it can be distributed where it's needed for the families and survivors and the victims of this tragedy. If you send it to one of our organizations, WFAA-TV, TXCN, the Dallas Morning News, still make your check to the American Red Cross DR789, and it'll get there. It'll just get there most quickly if you go to the Chase Bank tomorrow. You know, I'm supposed to tell you that this is a 501c3 account. That means it's tax deductible. I don't think that's really important this time, is it? This is about helping other people. I'll talk to you later tonight.
All right. Thanks a lot, Troy. I want to point out, first of all, that the Dallas Morning News has put out a special edition. It's free of charge. It's for anybody who wants it. Again, free of charge. Going to be at convenience stores around the area. That's available, again, now to everybody. It's out right now. 150,000 copies, I believe they said earlier. And we want to remind you that President Bush will address the nation this evening.
That's because he is already back in Washington, D.C., and his speech is scheduled for 7:30 this evening. And we, of course, will bring that to you live.
We will keep you updated with the very latest as this tragic story continues to unfold. For now, let's send it back to our network coverage. We'll see you back here on the News 8 Update tonight at 10.
Good evening.
About this at the moment, but that there were...
You've been watching News 8's continuing coverage of America Under Attack. Stay with News 8 for all the latest developments. We now rejoin ABC News.
Our medical editor, Tim Johnson, is here. Tim, we've heard mentioned several times very early on that burn victims here had gone as far away as burn centers in Canada, some of which are very efficient and well known. Is New York, at least in terms of burn centers, overwhelmed? Not able? Do you have any sense of this?
Well, I would guess it might well be, because burns are among the most difficult and demanding of all trauma injuries to take care of. Demanding in terms of personnel, of medical resources, of space, long-term care. The two huge, overwhelming problems with severe burns are fluid loss, which can lead to shock and quick death, and then long-term infection. Enormous problems taking care of the infections that result with serious burns. And so the care of these people really is something that demands long-term care and a lot of resources and a lot of personnel, and it can very quickly overwhelm even a major city like New York.
And so New York may have an adequate number of burn centers, but not
for the ordinary burn cases that occur in everyday life, but not for the kinds of injuries and numbers that may come out of this.
And the most middle-sized cities, which might have been what we call the tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, have burn centers?
They have burn centers, but limited numbers of beds in most of those cities. We're going to have to talk about major cities, Boston, Chicago, cities in Canada, elsewhere, to take care of numbers that might well come out of this kind of a disaster.
And we're going to go to the triage center in a moment and talk to ABC's Cynthia McFadden, who's been there waiting like so many other people. But explain to people again just basically what happens in triage. It's a question of selecting who to take care of and who to put aside.
Absolutely. You have limited resources by definition, and you have to decide who is most likely to benefit from those resources. Some you can put aside for later care. Others are so near death that any care is not going to be possible, so you focus on the ones that need immediate emergency care and have a chance of survival.
And it must be one of the toughest decisions that a doctor ever has to make.
It is. I worked in an emergency room for 15 years, and that is among the toughest decisions, of course.
I believe, by the way, and this is particularly relevant to the New York audience, we won't necessarily find the phone number here, but when Mayor Giuliani and the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, the head of the FBI in New York, and the governor were all giving a news conference some time ago, after the mayor had said, everybody don't feel any hate and anger, be New Yorkers, pull together, and the governor had said, you know, that we will, of course, get through this. He did point out that there was a true, genuine need for blood donors. And then I think we heard exactly the same thing from Attorney General Ashcroft, who said that anybody in the country who wanted to participate or felt they could give something, one of the things was to contact their local Red Cross center, because, as we know, there's a shortage of blood in the country. And the governor also said that they like it if doctors volunteered and nurses volunteered. Now, there's a catastrophic shortage of nurses in the country, and the burden that will be on doctors and nurses here. The military, Tim and John, as pretty much as I understand, they're getting civilian help at the Pentagon as well. The military pretty much is able to take care of its own under most circumstances, right?
It is, and the majority of injuries in the military, and I suspect the majority of injuries from this tragedy today will be crush injuries of various sorts. Again, burns are in a very special category requiring very special kinds of care, and that's going to be a real issue.
We also know, and I think we actually can give you some sense of this already, that 3 ships of the U.S. Navy are on their way to New York, one of which, the USS Comfort, is a hospital ship with 1,100 beds on its way, dispatched by the Health and Human Services and the military. And the aircraft carrier, the USS John F. Kennedy and the George Washington, are coming as well, on their way from farther down the East Coast to be put in New York Harbor, lest they are needed for a variety of reasons. And these aircraft carriers, particularly, and the Comfort, are hugely capable of taking care of casualties in a wide variety of ways. Hang on, Dr. Tim, we'll come back to you in just a second. But I do want to go to Cynthia McFadden, who is at the triage center itself. Cynthia, do you hear me?
I do, Peter.
So just bring us up to date with what's happened there since we last checked you.
Well, Peter, we're still standing by waiting. There are still hundreds of doctors and nurses here waiting. The grim realities are that they expect to tag hundreds, perhaps thousands of victims of this explosion throughout the night tonight. The reason the ambulances are still sitting empty at this point is because we understand from rescue workers they have not been able to get close enough to the actual midpoint of the explosion to actually bring anybody out, which is the reason that they are still standing by. They've told us the system here, Peter, I heard you talking about setting up a triage system. The system here will be as follows. Victims who come in and are tagged red are victims that they believe can be saved. Victims who are tagged yellow and green are walking wounded and will be quickly taken away to other locations. And then there are the black tags for those people who they feel they cannot help.
Thanks, Cynthia. We'll come back to you. I want to go quickly to Stoystown, Pennsylvania, at the moment, where ABC's Dan Harris is standing by. 4 aircraft involved today, and we know that on each one of them there was a hijacking in process. And the aircraft that crashed near Johnstown, Pennsylvania, was United Flight 93 with 38 passengers and 7 crew on board. ABC's Dan Harris rushed to the scene of that accident, and I hope is with us now. Dan, do you hear me?
Peter, I do hear you. And we have a new piece of information on this crash from ABC's Lisa Stark, who, as you know, covers aviation for ABC News. She tells us that Flight 93, which, as you mentioned, was departing from Newark and headed to San Francisco, filed for a change of flight plan request, requesting to change its destination from San Francisco to Washington. Shortly after that, it turned around and crashed about a mile from where we are right now in Stoystown, Pennsylvania. It crashed, and I believe we have some pictures of the crash scene. Crashed in an open field. All that you really see there is a huge crater. You can't even see it very well from our vantage point. A huge black gaping hole, as investigators are describing it. There is a lot of debris, most of it very small pieces of black charred remains. The FBI tonight is making a huge grid, and tomorrow morning it will begin what it calls a painstaking process of gathering the evidence. At this point, they say they're treating this as a crime, though they won't go so far as to say it is indeed an act of terrorism. If indeed the plane had successfully turned around and headed back toward Washington, and now it appears there would have been one more target. It did not make it, which is fortunate for Washington, unfortunate for the 45 people on board. No survivors, Peter.
Dan, it was indeed a chilling moment when you made a reference there to United Flight 93 asking for a change of flight plan, headed for San Francisco, asking for a flight plan that takes it to Washington. Have you picked up anything else on the ground tonight?
We have picked up from the FBI that there was 911 contact from the plane. Now, they wouldn't go so far as to confirm a report that has been circulating. The report says that one of the passengers locked himself in the bathroom of that plane and called 911 at 9:58 a.m., got in touch with a local 911 operator in this part of Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania, and told him there had been some sort of explosion on the plane. Shortly after that, 2 minutes later, in fact, the plane did go down. That report is not confirmed in total in some. However, the FBI says it has received tapes of a 911 call, and it is going to go over those tapes.
Just help us place Stoystown, Pennsylvania, a little more, with a little greater familiarity to people. You're fairly close to Johnstown?
We are fairly close to Johnstown. Stoystown is about 75 miles southeast of Pittsburgh and about 30 miles north of Maryland. It's a very rural area, and the area where the crash happened is really very, very rural. It's an open field, and as I said, there is a huge crater. There were some eyewitnesses, coal workers, who ran to the scene shortly after the crash. We've heard that they saw the plane going down. It was very unstable before it went down, as you might imagine. People who live nearby say they heard the ground, they felt the ground shake miles away. People who went to the scene, we spoke to one eyewitness a short time ago, said she saw lots of debris, but nothing very big. And in fact, that's what our pictures are bearing out, that the debris is very, very small. This made a very hard landing, Peter.
Thanks very much, Dan Harris in Stoystown, Pennsylvania tonight on the United Airlines flight, which started off from Newark to San Francisco, took off about 8:01. You see where it all converges? The first attack on the trade tower is just before 9 o'clock. The second one is after that, that an aircraft goes down at, sometime 8:35, between 8:30, maybe a little after 9 o'clock. And so the coordination involved in this has intelligence and military officials tonight confused, shocked, and steamed. Barbara Starr, one of our reporters at the Pentagon, reports tonight, quoting a senior intelligence official, our top priority tonight is nailing the SOBs who did this. And they are, Barbara reports us, tweaking every single intelligence system they have, their reconnaissance, their assets. And then they're going to go through, as we've heard earlier today, through all of the cable traffic. They're going to listen to all of the monitoring which the National Security Agency does of thousands of phone calls. And again, though this may not lead to anything, just a short while ago, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, who's a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, told the Associated Press that U.S. intelligence intercepted communications between supporters of Osama bin Laden discussing the attacks on the World Trade Center. And he then goes on to say, I'm just going to get his quote accurately here, they have an intercept of some information that included people associated with bin Laden who acknowledged a couple of targets were hit. I'm not sure how much that tells us at this point. They may simply having been reacting, if this report is true, they may simply have been reacting, as many people all over the world did immediately, to the fact that these attacks had actually occurred. It's not going to be very long from now before the president. I'm missing anything, John, before I go back to Washington and talk politics?
No, we're up to date.
Okay. John McCarthy, outside the Pentagon, unusually removed from your post, which I know must be very frustrating at this point, John. Want to add to Barbara Starr's reporting in terms of attitude on behalf of the military at the moment?
Well, attitude and what you described as the intelligence community is now doing is a major wash. They are going after every agent they have all over the globe. They are focusing every piece of technology they have. They are desperately looking for answers to who did it. So they can then better go after who did it with what undoubtedly, I now believe, is going to be a series of military strikes. But you cannot do that until you have a very focused piece of intelligence that leads you directly to the culprits. And then there is, of course, the problem, once you decide you are going to use military force, of trying to decide how to make it in any way effective. It does feel good oftentimes to retaliate against accused people that you believe have done a terrible act like this to the United States, but it doesn't necessarily go after them and often creates additional problems, especially if it is proved that the terrorists who did this came from a region near the Middle East, like Afghanistan. That is going to set off a whole series of very complex political machinations, Peter, that could end up coming back on the United States.
But let me ask you an operational question, John. We believe at the moment that the United States had no inkling of what was going to happen, but there's a history of terrorism in various other parts of the world to which the United States has been party victimized by in one way or the other. After an incident has occurred, is there any history of a tendency of people who perpetrated the terrorism to talk?
There is a history to claim credit in some way. Although I must say, Osama bin Laden, if he turns out to be the culprit who is behind this, has been often circumspect in the days and months after an attack.
Intelligence sources have indicated in previous attacks that his organization was involved, but they had to piece that information together because he was, at least in the initial period after the attack, absolutely silent.
Thank you very much, John McCarthy. We have a microphone open somewhere else, and I think just trying to pick up the sound that it is in our Washington position across from the White House. It's appropriate because we want to go there now where Claire Shipman has been for most of the day. And Claire, the President, I think, is going, you tell us clearly, the President's going to talk to us, I think, fairly quickly now, fairly soon now?
That's right. He's going to talk to us, we're told, in just over 10 minutes, Peter. And I think what you've been talking about tonight, a lot
Claire,
of
let me stop. Can I stop you? Maybe you'd move your microphone up. I'm sorry. There's a microphone, I believe, in your little location there, which is interfering with what you are trying to say. So do you want to try again?
All right. Is this any better?
It's somewhat better, yeah.
Good. Okay. Rough conditions here. But you've been talking about a lot of the anger being expressed in Washington tonight from military officials and others, and I think that is the sort of thing we're going to hear from the President tonight. We've been told he is quite angry. He's eager to talk about it. We're told his speech is going to be a mix of condolence, anger, and also retaliation, that he wants to make it very plain just how quickly he intends to act when he feels the United States is able to act. He and his aides still putting finishing touches on this speech. Probably hard to exaggerate the enormous importance of this speech for him tonight, Peter. A couple of other notes. Condoleezza Rice is at the White House with him as National Security Advisor. Colin Powell arrived recently back in Washington at Andrews Air Force Base, and we're told might be heading to the White House, but that depends on some security issues. The President was to meet with Vice President Cheney once he arrived back at the White House, and then we were told from security forces that he was going to have to leave the White House. They didn't want to keep the President and the Vice President for very long in the same location, and he would either be heading home or to Camp David. Peter?
Thanks very much, Claire. We're going to come back to you very shortly because the President is going to talk. And in fact, Colin Powell just came back from Colombia today, where he has been, he's been visiting with leaders of Latin America about, among other things, the war against the international drug community, which is based very largely in Colombia. And there is no reason that any part of the world tonight should be, whatever our instincts are, whatever the history is, there's no reason tonight to rule out criminals from any part of the world who have the money, if not always the sophistication. That's a big, big question in terms of trying to resolve today, to have mounted this attack against the United States, though, as always, the intelligence community has gone almost immediately to Osama bin Laden as a principal suspect. And we don't know why they have done that, but it seems to be something of a tradition. It was great to see. It was really great to see the members of Congress gather and sing God Bless America, and to tell the country and the world that the country's hanging together. But there was a time earlier today when the capital city was just closing down as absolutely fast as they could get it closed down. Take a look at this report from ABC's Michelle Norris.
With the Pentagon burning in the distance, the nation's capital was evacuated.
This is the first time we had a mandatory evacuation of the Capitol and the House and Senate office buildings.
Bewildered employees got out as fast as they could, while key congressional leaders were carefully whisked away to safe and undisclosed locations. Top leaders from throughout the administration were immediately placed under special protection.
The leaders are in undisclosed locations for their own safety and to ensure that we can reconstitute decision-making when that's appropriate.
The United States Secret Service immediately secured the President, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House, and they are all safe.
It's all part of official Washington's civil defense plan to ensure that the federal government continues to function smoothly even while the nation is under attack.
And they basically have a playbook initially to assess how serious is this threat. Do we need to have a lot of people move very far away from Washington, or do we just need to have a few key backup people get outside of the immediate downtown area?
During the Cold War, the federal government developed an elaborate evacuation plan to make sure top leaders would survive a nuclear attack by taking them to a series of secret bunkers just outside Washington. Today, that wasn't necessary, but nonetheless, the nation's top decision makers remain under very heavy protection.
Making sure that the federal government continues to function, I think, is very important in a time of crisis because it reassures the public that somebody is in charge and the situation is well in hand.
And in today's time of crisis, Americans, as well as many elsewhere in the world, will be looking for that reassurance. Michelle Norris, ABC News, Washington.
Information is pouring into our newsroom from everywhere, trying to understand this. Here's a message from a friend who happens to be an architectural engineer who knows something about the World Trade Center and who believes that a member of the family may have been killed in the Trade Center at all. It's been impossible for... We've only had one person, at least on this broadcast, identified all day, and that is the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, who managed to call her husband from the aircraft that was hijacked and then subsequently attacked the Pentagon. But he, an engineer and an architect, speculates here that the heat above the crash site on the twin trade towers may have indeed caused the building above to melt, just simply collapsing in itself and putting enormous weight on the rest of the building below, which could not possibly stand it. And the steel columns which go up through the building, built to code at best, would only be able, he believes, to have been able to stand an hour and a half of intense fire like this, pressing down on the rest of the building until it finally was able to give way. It was a very well-built building, probably better, given its size and the attention and everything else, much better than similar buildings built today, because it was the first of its style. And as we know, in many American cities as well as overseas, there are a lot more daring architectural structures of this magnitude in many parts of the world today. And in Asia particularly, people building these astonishingly high buildings as showplaces, almost a competition going on in the rest of the world as to who can build the tallest, most daring building. Well, there's a very simple, long box structure built well, according to the engineers who know it. And the heat of that fire from those penetrations of the two aircraft, in his view, may have made the difference. It will take us time to find out. John Miller, latest.
There's really no change other than rescue operations have started now at the World Trade Center, ones that were hampered because of the impending collapse of 7 World Trade Center, the third building to go down. Bodies have started to be brought to the morgue, but only in very small numbers now. That's going to be a massive operation that continues. And of course, as we've all discussed, the mounting of a massive federal investigation in tandem with the intelligence community's assistance to the military to try to put a name to this.
I wonder if anybody else is as aware as I am at the moment. I'm sure people are aware as I am at the moment of previous investigations we have done of far lesser incidents. Attack on TWA 800 is one. The investigation at the Al Khobar Towers, which was conducted by retired General Wayne Downing, who's with us in our Washington Bureau. We'll talk to him after the president tonight. All of these investigations have gone on and on and on and on, and many of them just really didn't resolve anything in the final analysis.
Yet many of them did. The largest acts of terrorism on U.S. soil, ironically the bombing of the World Trade Center, the attacks in East Africa have been solved to the extent that people have been charged. Many have been brought back to this country. The FBI actually has a terrific track record that way in chasing these leads out to the ends of the earth. We were talking about something a minute ago, though, that is part of the fog of war in these things. After the Al Khobar explosion, there were intercepts of people calling Osama bin Laden's headquarters to congratulate him. And in these intercepts, there was no, he didn't say, well, thanks, but it wasn't me. Now the government is taking the position that it was the Iranians. So you really have to sort through the information very carefully before you choose your suspects.
Yeah, I just simply wish to make the point that it's going to take a long time, and that the impatience that we all feel about striking back at somebody who's done this thing to the country is not going to be requited, I think, for very long. ABC's Pierre Thomas, by the way, reports that his FBI sources are telling him that several people on board both 2 of the planes which went down, this would be the one of the Pentagon, at least one of those coming either to New York or to Pennsylvania, were able to get out on their cell phones and call their relatives. And they described horrific scenes on board the aircraft, people being attacked and stabbed on board the aircraft itself. We've heard at least one piece of information that the weapon of choice, at least on one of the aircraft, was a box cutter, what professionals and sometimes amateurs use with the razor blade through it, that enables you to open up cardboard boxes in a hurry, and has, of course, been a weapon of crime with which we're all familiar. And as John Miller, who knows more about these things than most, pointed out easier, you take a plastic one on board and it's very hard for a security device to detect. But I want to go quickly to Midtown New York City again, just before we go to the President, and get a quick update from Diane Sawyer. Diane?
Peter, I'm standing out here, and as you can see around me, there's a dramatic change in activity, and I don't know how much you could hear earlier when we were telling you about it, but we have 6 bulldozers down here now. We have an entire line, an entire street full of EMS crews and ambulances. It appears they have got the lights up. The generators are working, and it's very possible they could be moving in soon for some kind of activity actually on the site. And I've got Don Daler here with me. We've been dividing up all the duties here, and he's been down to the scene. And also J.D. Halpern, who said he's just a volunteer who came in from California and was around the area. I just wanted to know, how much fire is there? You said you were just at ground zero. How much fire is left?
Well, the building 7, there was no fire there whatsoever, but there was one truck putting water on the building, but it's collapsed completely. And then the other building that there were some flames still coming up was in World Trade Center 1, but not a lot.
And you said you saw melted tour buses, melted cars?
The cars that were right down there, it was just unbelievable. They were twisted and melted into nothing. The debris is just unbelievable. And then you can see fire trucks and police vehicles that were down there early that all their windows, the windshields are completely blown out must have been from when debris dropped.
We can even see from here that the smoke seems to have gone down, Don. And I want to repeat, Peter, because J.D. was saying, as well as Don earlier, in case you didn't hear us, that it is carpeted up there. It is ankle deep in papers.
In some places, papers and debris go up 2 or 3 feet high. You have to wade through in some areas.
These are financial documents.
Yeah, the ones I looked at, many of them were financial documents, very personal documents that when I saw the first explosion that hit, there was just a snow cascade of paper, and the whole area down there is just coated with it.
Well, Peter, again, we'll let you know as soon as we can confirm that they are going in to the site. We should say that the mayor was here just a minute ago and drove by, waved at us, but would not stop. Back to you.
Diane, just exactly where are you?
We're about 4.5 blocks from ground zero.
Okay, thank you very much, Diane Sawyer. Don Daler. Don Daler did a wonderful job for us earlier today, giving us some sense of what was happening as close as you could get to the scene. And I'm also joined now by ABC's George Stephanopoulos, who's been downtown all today. And so we'll have a chance to revisit that scene from a variety of locations after we hear from the President, because it's 8:30 Eastern Time, 3:30 in the West, and we are about to hear from the President of the United States. I think most of you know that the President has been on something of a strange journey today. He went off to Florida to promote education. He was in Florida when this occurred. He was then literally taken up by the security apparatus which surrounds him, and taken off first to Louisiana, where he touched down at an Air Force base. We didn't know what was going to happen next. He was then taken off to Nebraska, to the old Strategic Air Command, one of the old Strategic Air Command bases from the Cold War days, put into a bunker or down the rabbit hole, as it was described to us. ABC's Ann Compton was with him all day and talked all day about the struggle between the security and the political apparatus to whether the President could get back to Washington. Well, the President is back in Washington now, and there has been no time in his presidency, and there may never be a time like this again, when it has been so important what he says to the country, because I think we all know at moments like this, the country looks to the President of the United States for understanding, for knitting the country together, and some presidents do it brilliantly, and some do not. Here is Mr. Bush. Okay, this was well, the President isn't sitting there trying to think about what to say, I can assure you. The President is sitting there because someone on network television has sat him down and said, we'll cue you in 30 seconds, Mr. Bush. And so, as awkward as it looks to him, this is what we've expected him to do. And now here he is.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief. terrible sadness and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
The President of the United States, when he is in many respects needed most. And we've been joined, we've been joined by George Stephanopoulos, who's been downtown all day and who very quickly picked up, George, that the President may have given us a hint in his first couple of lines there to the magnitude of this.
He said thousands of lives that were suddenly ended. The first number we've had all day by an official verifying the magnitude of the casualties. Thousands of lives suddenly ended. He also did a lot of other things in this very short speech, Peter. He gave voice to the anger that many Americans are feeling. He talked about the quiet, unyielding anger of America, and then was very pointed in giving reassurance. Military is prepared. The emergency teams are on their way. Government will be back to business tomorrow. Our economy will be back to business tomorrow. And then finally, Peter, what I found most interesting in the section about where he talked about retaliation, he said America would make no distinction between the terrorists and those who harbor them, which is a message to any state which may be supporting these terrorists who are behind this act.
Well, which creates a huge dilemma for the United States of America, because if it is discovered, as we've talked several times throughout the day, that a state and I've forgotten who it was, a former director of the CIA perhaps earlier today, who said he couldn't believe that a state would actually support Jim Woolsey, former director of the CIA, who said directly he couldn't believe that a state would actively support an act such as this, though it may have over periods of time, as Iran and Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan have all been suspected to do, give collateral or indirect support down through the years.
The word that the president used was so expansive, Peter. It wasn't just supported or funded. It was any who harbored them, who may have given them sanctuary at any time. That is a very open-ended commitment.
And then I thought, by the way, also, if I may add, that this president particularly, who feels so strongly about his Christianity, felt it a good time to say, to quote those lines from Psalm 23, even though I walk, or yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I fear no evil, because God is with me. And that will just sit so appropriately, I believe, in the minds and the sentiments of many Americans tonight. And we've felt throughout the day, we heard scattered reports of people going to churches and saying a prayer for those people who may or may not be lost, and for the families of those people around the country. Because don't forget, relatives in these locations have relatives all over the country. This is a total engagement with the nation. And I think you pretty much covered it all, except for one thing, George. The president talked also about the sense of safety and security of young people in America, particularly who were threatened today. And we heard that from people around the country today, people who simply could not believe, as it was the case at Oklahoma City, that this was happening in the United States. It's always something that happens somewhere else.
Or in the movies. And this is far worse than any plot that anyone could have ever devised. And I think I was downtown, as you mentioned today, Peter, so it was more surreal there, almost because people were so determined to get back to the normal life, even as all of downtown was being closed off. So I was a little bit cut off from what was happening around the country, but you did feel it down there.
But I think this is very characteristic of New York, and probably would have been characteristic of any other major community in the country, any other community as well. Terry Moran, who covers Mr. Bush for us today, but ironically wasn't with him today as he went on this education trip, not on normal. I think you are now, Terry, back at your regular location on the north lawn of the White House. Does that mean the White House has loosened up just a little bit?
Well, it has, Peter. The White House has leapt to life after several hours of the White House compound itself and the blocks around it in Washington essentially being deserted, a ghost town really coming in here. It is now a beehive of activity with government officials, cabinet secretaries. The president, of course, has returned. The First Lady has returned, and they are now working well into the night on this crisis. The president that you saw in these remarks, we are told, is the man who absorbed this tragedy today. He was described as steely throughout the day, as someone who did not react with great emotion or anger, who was able to see the pictures that America saw while he was in the air in Air Force One, and reacted very seriously, very soberly, pretty much as we saw him tonight.
Now, you say that the White House is up and running again, full in action, though the White House is clearly never completely out of action, no matter where it is. But what do you actually mean by that? What are they doing?
Well, what we are seeing right now is the president and his top advisors huddled in the Oval Office and in the study off the Oval Office. We saw cabinet secretaries and FEMA Director Joe Albaugh were here earlier, and Joe Albaugh is still here. He is briefing the president on the emergency response teams that he's sent out. The president is receiving information from his national security advisor, Condoleezza Rice. You just see a great deal of activity. And you're right, this was not a completely deserted White House. Vice President Cheney was here, as was Dr. Rice, through the day. And in fact, we are told that the president, while he was in the air, had an open line of communication to the vice president throughout the day.
And Terry, you know as well as I do that much of the country had this feeling of helplessness today. As the president said, our sense of safety and security as a national entity were attacked today. They must have been just as frustrated, because they didn't really know any more in the White House than we did on the outside.
They did not, and the president's response and the Secret Service's response to the events as they developed was determined by misinformation sometime. At one point, there was a report of a car bomb going off at the State Department. At another point, there was a report that this plane that crashed in Pennsylvania was on its way towards Camp David, and those things helped determine the Secret Service's decision to keep the president out of Washington, to put in place this plan to take him to Air Force bases which are predetermined and keep him away from harm.
So the staff works on at the White House to get some sense of what is it. Thanks, Terry. I'll come back to you in just a minute, man. We've been joined in Washington by Leon Panetta, a former White House chief of staff for Bill Clinton, now out of government, back for the most part in California, if I remember correctly, Mr. Panetta.
That's correct.
So what's the White House chief of staff do at a moment like this? Where do you reach? What buttons do you try to push? Who do you try to connect with? Are you in some respects at the mercy of the military and intelligence establishment at the moment?
Well, you should not be. What you should do is try to organize the White House team so that the main focus is in the White House. You have your security people, your military people, your defense people. You have your national security advisor, your State Department people. I think it's better to run this kind of crisis directly from the White House so the president is in charge of not only what happened, but what to do.
Take us back to Oklahoma City and to the attack on the barracks resident at Al-Khobar in Saudi Arabia. What am I, 96, 97? I apologize, I've forgotten.
I believe about 96.
Were you just immensely frustrated that you just didn't know anything?
Well, Oklahoma City, the first time we heard of Oklahoma City, it was on television. And we were sitting near the Oval Office watching television reports of what had happened. And it was only after it was first reported on television that we began to get some telephonic communication about what had taken place. But you feel rather helpless because you know a tragedy has taken place, but you don't know all of the facts and why it happened. And you know, Oklahoma is a good example of not jumping to conclusions, because in Oklahoma City, we had all kinds of thoughts that this was a Middle East terrorist effort in Oklahoma, and it turned out not to be. So I hope this country has the patience to carefully investigate, determine who really did this, and then respond.
To be open about it, we've said this several times today and reminded people in Oklahoma City that our tendency towards prejudice emerged pretty quickly and was proved to be wrong. As you have tried, I assume, to talk to people around the world today, have you picked up anything which contributes to the understanding of this?
Not really. I mean, you have obviously your suspicions about who's involved, but we are a country that believes first and foremost in justice. That's what distinguishes us from the people who carried out these acts. So I hope we take the time to fully investigate this matter, determine who did it, and then take appropriate action. That's what a great democracy does.
But there is, Mr. Panetta, tremendous pressure on the president to strike back at somebody. We've struck back at Osama bin Laden's training camps in Afghanistan, didn't get him, spent a fortune, and didn't accomplish very much. Is the pressure on the president huge to do something in order to satisfy the anger and the frustration of the American people?
The pressure is incredible, Peter. It's coming from politicians on Capitol Hill. It's coming from constituents. It's coming from, I'm sure, many in the public who want to strike back in some way. The president is the leader of this country. He's got to take the time to make sure we do what's right. And what's right in this instance is to take the time to fully investigate this matter, determine who are the culprits, and then take appropriate action. That's been the course of action that the United States has taken in the past, and it's the course of action we've got to take now.
Thanks very much, Leon Panetta, for joining us, reminding us that the president's resolve will be tested, but also so will be his patience. We've talked a lot about the attack on Al-Khobar in Saudi Arabia in the mid-1990s when American military personnel posted in Saudi Arabia were the victims of a terrorist attack. And the retired General Wayne Downing is with us in the Washington Bureau. He was the senior military officer assigned to write the report on the Al-Khobar towers. And General Downing, you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. There's one note in the note that was handed to me a while ago about you. You were responsible for making recommendations about making U.S. citizens safe from worldwide terrorist attacks. What were your recommendations, and is there anything that happened today which suggested your recommendations were not followed?
No, I think in this particular case, Khobar Towers was a surprise. It should not have been, because we had a bombing over there in Saudi Arabia in November of 1995. And Khobar, after that bombing, was assessed to be the #1 target in the Middle East. And in the subsequent bombing in June, we found ourselves surprised, a lack of situational awareness. I don't think that's the case today. I think people in our Congress, people in the executive branch, certainly the National Commission on Terrorism that I served on last year, it was a congressionally appointed commission, pointed out that we had a serious problem with the possibility of an attack by a weapons of mass destruction. And if we saw anything today, we saw an attack with weapons of mass destruction.
General Downing, I've asked this question several times today. Perhaps you wouldn't mind answering it as well. There is a sense that the intelligence community or the counter-terrorist organizations in the country were consumed with the fear or the awareness of a chemical or biological weapons attack on the United States, and this kind of conventional attack got less than full appreciation, the potential of it. Is that a fair observation?
I don't think that's fair. I think certainly we have been concerned about chemical and biological, but I think the experts in this business have always felt that our greatest threat came from a kinetic energy weapon or an event like this, a suicide, if not aircraft, certainly a suicide bomber, suicide truck.
And do you agree with others today, particularly in the intelligence community, both in it currently and even some members of Congress who said the failure here is the United States' emphasis on human intelligence around the world, that one of the mistakes the United States made was to downgrade the degree of human intelligence that people thought was necessary?
Well, this is a complicated subject. Certainly when the American barracks in Beirut was bombed in 1983, one of the findings that Admiral Long came up with on his investigation was we had a problem with intelligence. Certainly one of the things that came out of Khobar was we didn't have enough human intelligence. We did not have tactical warning. But I think what we came up with was the fact that the terrorists we're up against are not going to give us the opportunity to get tactical warning. And so it's a very, very difficult subject. Now, to be fair to the intelligence community, they have made Herculean efforts over the last several years to improve our access to tactical information. And it's a very, very difficult subject. It's a difficult subject because we as Americans are very uneasy sometimes with the type of people we have to deal with to get this kind of intelligence. So on the one hand, we want the information, but on the other hand, we get very upset sometimes with some of the dirty, rotten people you must deal with who have this kind of information. And I think we're in a new era now. I mean, I think we've seen a formal declaration of war on the United States, although it shouldn't surprise us. We've got a lot of people saying this, our enemies, people who hate us, for many years. But now we see a manifestation on a scale that is almost unbelievable.
Downing, I very much appreciate you waiting for us and taking the time to tell us, to talk to us. Is the former Commander-in-Chief of the Special Operations Unit, is General Downing, and he wrote the Khobar's report, the report which investigated the attack on Americans in Saudi Arabia in November of 1995. We're going to go in just a second now to ABC's Robert Krulwich and then talk to the engineer, or one of the engineers who worked on the trade tower, see if we can understand what it was that brought these buildings down today. But first, some more fairly late news from John Miller. John?
Since the rescue workers are now first starting to work that scene, they're starting to have some very interesting results. 2 Port Authority police officers, the Port Authority being the entity that runs the World Trade Center, have been found trapped in the rubble. There is a team of police officers trying to dig them out. They're apparently alive. A strange case, a 911 operator in Pennsylvania says she's received a call from people trapped in the rubble 40 feet from the Vista Hotel or the Millennium Hotel. They say they're near a fountain.
On the west side of Manhattan?
Yes,
right.
In the World Trade Center complex, and they're calling out from where they're trapped beneath the rubble to a 911, perhaps on a Pennsylvania cell phone, but that went to an operator in Pennsylvania, and they're trying to kind of triangulate where they are to get to them. So things are picking up there. They've also brought in dogs from all the counties around the city to aid in helping to sniff victims out.
Exactly as we've said before today, exactly they do in the case of an earthquake. People are now underground, and dogs are just the best thing you have in trying to locate them.
Yet, as we've learned so often in modern times, in recent times, in Columbine, the role of the cell phone in modern disaster is incredible. From the people who called out from the airplane, something we really didn't expect, an odd development, to people perhaps calling out from the rubble, if that's a legitimate call to the Pennsylvania operator.
Great. John Miller, we'll come back to you. Now to try to examine the building. ABC's Robert Krulwich has put together a piece on the structural engineering of the World Trade Centers, perhaps better able help us to understand that when these two aircraft hit these two towers today, exactly what was going on. Robert?
Why did the towers collapse as quickly and as suddenly as they did? Engineers from the original firm that built the towers told ABC they can only guess at this point, but they believe that the collisions themselves, the plane hitting building number 1 and the plane that smashed into building number 2, by themselves, they did not cause the collapse. It was the fire, they say, the intense fire and heat from the explosions that brought the buildings down. Temperatures inside could have built up to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, steel loses its strength, and steel beams connect every floor to the outside walls. As it got hotter, the beams got weaker, and the hot air inside began to push and press against the outside walls until the outside walls just buckled, snapped, and released the top floor, which fell onto the floor below, and the entire building sinks in a straight vertical, the floors falling faster and faster down, until you notice that every floor in the building is gone. Viewed from another angle, you can see the same thing. Notice the aerial stays vertical, just stays straight as it sinks into the building. There's no buckling or tipping, just straight down. And this happened in both buildings. The first tower, too, stayed straight as it went down, each floor falling neatly on top of the other. So the reason the towers went so quickly is because all the floors were literally hanging onto the skin. And once the skin went, the buildings went too. Robert Krulwich, ABC News.
Well, that report, as we look at New York City at night, which has a still quality about it tonight. It's a city of light at night, as so many American cities are, but there's a still, almost calm look of it from the sky. It's anything but that on the ground. But this is the second time from Robert Krulwich and also from some architect engineers we talked to a little earlier that say it was the heat which caused the building to collapse, because that the steel at the top of the building would maybe have only been able to sustain an hour and a half of intense fire, and then the steel begins, as Robert points out, so clearly collapse upon itself all the way down to the bottom. I think we have with us on the phone or in person from Seattle, John Magnuson, who is an engineer. John, are you there? John Magnuson, who is with the company that actually built the World Trade Center towers. John, have you heard our two layman explanations tonight of what it was we think collapsed the building, and do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I need to say one thing. At the time of the design of the World Trade Center, that was in the mid-1960s, and I was in 6th grade. So to kind of put in perspective how much time has passed since this design was actually completed. But the description of the fact that steel, when it gets up to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, that it loses its strength is accurate. The buildings actually survived the impact of both the planes, and it was really the fire that finally created the disaster.
And the upper floor fell on the next floor down, which fell on the next floor, and the sheer accumulation of weight just forced the whole building to collapse on itself.
Right there, from the videotape, and I can only go from what I've seen on television, but the videotape showed that several of the upper floors fell onto the next lower floor that was still intact. And once that happens, there's going to be an instant overload situation, and then it will fail.
and then that will drop down to the next floor into another instant overload situation. And so the floors just progressively collapse down all the way to the bottom.
I appreciate very much the fact that you were very young in the mid-1960s when the trade towers were built, though I have heard it said earlier today that they in fact, were stronger, more sensible structures than many of the more daring-shaped buildings that are being built in parts of the world today.
Right. The term that structural engineers use is redundancy. And the World Trade Center towers really set a new standard in redundancy. And that's why those airplanes were able to crash into the towers without causing the structural failure. The buildings were still standing. And then the problem was the fire and the jet fuel. And in normal buildings, all the steel is protected with fireproofing, and there's sprinkler systems, but they're not designed to protect against a jet fuel fire inside of a building.
Can you be a little more precise what you mean by redundancy?
Redundancy is that if you have a structural element that is damaged and is no longer able to carry the load, that load is able to be passed on to other elements or other columns or other beams within the building. And the columns on the World Trade Center, they were spaced at 39 inches on center all the way across each face.
What does that mean, 39 inches at center?
Every 3 feet 3 inches there was a column that supported the building. So they were very closely spaced together. Many buildings, the columns are 10 or 15 feet apart or more. And so having these very close spaced columns on the outside created a lot of redundancy. That's why there was able to be a hole in the side. If you go back and look at the tapes, there was a tremendous hole in the side of the building, and it didn't collapse until the fire brought it down.
And Trade Tower number 7, which was the last to go, which was a building 47 stories high, do you have any sense of why it ultimately collapsed? Was it the concussion of the other buildings collapsing which undermined it?
I'm not familiar with that building. We were not involved in that building, and I haven't seen any of the details on that yet.
So aside from your horror, which I assume you share with the rest of us today, when you look at what has happened today, do you learn something?
Well, it's a very difficult situation because if you take that much of a load and that much jet fuel and you put it into a building, there's very little that you can do. And really, I think the solution to this will be to keep the planes and keep these attacks away from the doorsteps of these buildings.
John Nance, who's our aviation analyst, said to us several hours ago when speculating, as we all are in many cases, about who may have been involved, said he would not be surprised if somewhere in the world there was a structural engineer who was part of this operation. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense. I sure would hope not. Every structural engineer is dedicated to preserving the public safety. And just the thought that someone would take that training and use it for evil purposes just really disgusts me.
Is there anything I've missed, John? No. No? Okay. I'm very grateful for the time. What's it like up there in Seattle tonight? People feeling exactly the same thing people here in New York City are feeling?
Yes, and there was certainly a lot of apprehension during the day. Many of the buildings were evacuated just as precautionary measures. But there's this same empty feeling in your stomach about the whole thing, and just watching. People, of course, were glued to the coverage on the television sets.
Well, thank you for being so articulate about it and helping us understand, at least from the, thank you very much, from the slightly cold-blooded language of engineers and journalists covering this from some distance today, the structure of the building, which may not have been able to stand up to that fire, which was caused when those two planes, the first and the second, struck under somebody's control fairly high up in these superstructures, and then simply, as Robert Krulwich pointed out, and John Magnuson confirms, collapsed down upon themselves. And it was the president, we think. George Stephanopoulos is still with me. You were down there all today. It was the president, we think, who gave some clue to that which we have feared most of the day, that it wasn't hundreds of people involved in this, but thousands.
But thousands, yes. But Peter, I think, and I was thinking of this as John Magnuson was talking, when you talk about the strength of the building, in the coming days, we're also going to be hearing about some amazing, not only rescue stories, but survival stories. I spoke with the relative of someone who was on the 102nd floor of the first building today. After it took the hit from the airplane, that person still made it down from the 102nd floor and is home safe tonight.
It's very interesting because one of the lawyers had come down from a lower floor, believed that many people had got down in a fairly orderly fashion from some of the highest floors, at certainly right underneath where the attack had occurred, which has given people here, and I suspect in the country, some hope tonight that many more people get out of this building than we thought. It is now 9 o'clock Eastern Time. In the East, it is now 6 o'clock. On the West Coast, up and down the West Coast in the United States, it is about 12 hours, just 12 hours and a bit since many of us walking to work were suddenly confronted with having to deal with this in one way or another. And there's a huge, huge number of developments to catch up with. I want to go first of all, as we just review this, because this all happened in the morning of Good Morning, right in the middle of at the very end of Good Morning America. Charles Gibson, Charlie Gibson, and Diane Sawyer were there on television live when this happened, and so it seems appropriate that we go to Diane, and Diane, ask you to put together some reconstruction of it for us.
Traffic helicopters were the first to report an explosion in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Witnesses say they saw it, a plane crashing into the building.
I saw something push the building in, and then I saw the tail, and then I saw flame.
Out! Everybody else, let's go! Evacuation begins inside the building. Then, a few minutes later, just after 9 a.m., as smoke pours from the top of the North Tower, an unbelievable sight, a second plane hitting the South Tower.
Oh, my God! Oh, jeez! Oh, my God!
There are gaping holes in flames coming now from both towers. Witnesses see people screaming from the higher floors.
They're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
I see people jumping from the top of the World Trade Center.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the fire.
It was about 10 o'clock a.m. when the South Tower collapsed.
A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
On the ground, there's chaos. Flaming debris, someone said, like at the dark side of the moon.
It was bad. It was like a dust storm or something. Like I couldn't see anything.
About 20 minutes later, the second tower crumbles to the ground.
Oh my God, there it goes!
Symbols of New York, the World Trade Center towers, are simply gone.
Diane Sawyer giving us what it was like, at least from a distance, because we've all been at a distance from this, what it was like in those first moments. Now let's look at it from another perspective, because ABC's Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us, as we've said several times today, is able, I think, to take you there, Lisa?
I am, Peter.
Lisa's in Seattle today, where she's been out at the Boeing company. It was Boeing jets, Boeing equipment, 757s and 767s involved. Why don't you just walk us through what you and we now know about how this unfolded from the point of view of the hijackers?
All right, I will, but Peter, I want to give you a little bit of new information first, if I may. There's a meeting going on, we understand, between the Federal Aviation Administration and the major carriers at this point. They are trying to determine how they might be able to get air service back up and going again tomorrow, what steps would need to be taken. We do understand from a number of sources that one of the things they are considering is a resumption of the Air Marshal program. That would be armed air marshals that would actually fly on a number of flights. Now, that happens now in the United States, but it's a very small percentage of flights. It's unclear whether they would ramp up to every flight. That seems unlikely. But whether they are considering whether they would put air marshals on a number of flights as a precaution throughout the United States. One of the options that they are talking about.
Okay, just before you go to your chronology then, let me remind people that what you mean by air service back up is because hundreds of airplanes and thousands of passengers, an extraordinary job of air traffic control and pilots getting planes safely on the ground when the FAA decided everybody should land at the nearest possible airport, many of which are in Canada. And so there are thousands of people stranded far away from home tonight, safe, but when you refer to air service being got back up again, you basically mean getting the nation's air communication systems back up and running.
Absolutely. There's a national ground stop throughout the United States until at least noon tomorrow. It's going to be a massive task to get the system up and running, and obviously the main concern is to do it safely, to make sure that we don't have a repeat of the horrible events that we saw today. So there are security issues that are paramount, and there are also simply operational issues. How do you sort of turn the switch back on and get as many as 40,000 flights every day in the United States back in the air? And those discussions about that are underway right now, we understand.
We'll all follow that one. Now take us, if you would, through the movement of the aircraft which were ultimately and fatally involved.
What we know is that American Airlines Flight 11 was the first plane involved. That was the plane, a 767, en route from Boston's Logan Airport to Los Angeles. The plane took off shortly after 8 o'clock, we understand. About a half hour into the flight, it made a sharp left turn down towards New York. There were massive changes in airspeed apparently at that time. As the plane then headed toward Manhattan, it slowed and slammed into the World Trade Tower. It had been in the air about 45 minutes. Now, at the same time this was going on, there was a United Airlines 767, Flight 175, also from Boston to Los Angeles. It also was in the air, taken over by hijackers. That plane made a turn towards New Jersey, then made virtually a U-turn and came up toward the Trade Tower from the south, came over Staten Island. It slammed into the second Trade Tower. It had also been in the air about 45 minutes. Now, before any of these planes actually hit the World Trade Center, a third plane, a United Airlines 757, American Airlines American Airlines 757, it was Flight 77 from Dulles, had taken off. It was bound for Los Angeles as well. We don't know much about the flight path of that plane. We believe it was in the air about 1 hour before it hit the Pentagon. Then we have the fourth plane, United Flight 93, another 757, en route from Newark to San Francisco. We are unclear about the departure time. We have some conflicting information about that, whether it was close to 8 o'clock or closer to 8:45. It did depart Newark Airport. It appears that hijackers may have taken control of the plane over Cleveland. That is when it suddenly made a turn back toward the east. We also understand that sometime at that point, someone from the cockpit called the FAA and requested a change in flight plan. They said, we're not going to San Francisco. We want to go to Washington, D.C., to DCA, which is National Airport. It's unclear whether there was another Washington target, perhaps, that this plane was aiming for. Either way, it didn't make it all the way to Washington. It crashed in Pennsylvania. A total of 266 passengers and crew on all four of these planes. The toll could have been even much, much worse on the jetliners because they were very lightly filled. They can hold anywhere from 185 to 250 people. The most crowded plane had 90 passengers and crew members on it. Peter, we also want to mention, if we can, that as this was unfolding, people on board these planes were able to communicate what was going on. We know some details about that. We know on Flight 11, that was the American Airlines flight, the first one that hit the World Trade Tower, a flight attendant was able to call the American Airlines Operations Center. The flight attendant informed them that a number of flight attendants had been stabbed and that the perpetrators had stormed the cockpit. She was also able to tell them, apparently, the seat number of at least one of the hijackers. She was able to give them that information. We also know that there were some cell phone calls from at least two of the other planes. There was a cell phone call, as you have reported earlier, from the plane that slammed into the Pentagon, a woman calling her husband, saying that these hijackers were on board, that they had box cutters, those sorts of knives, and they had herded all of the passengers into the back of the plane. And we understand there was also a cell phone call on the United 175 flight That was the other flight that hit the World Trade Tower. Apparently, a son on that plane called his father from his cell phone and also said there were hijackers on board with knives. So we do know that as the events were unfolding, what was going on 30,000 feet above the United States was being communicated. Of course, unfortunately, there was nothing the people on the ground could do about any of this except watch in horror as these planes ended up where they ended up.
Well, thanks very much, Lisa Stark, who has given us a very clear picture many times today on what precisely happened, or at least as much as we know of what happened. Thank you. On board those planes, we do not very often make recommendations for people's behavior from this chair, but as Lisa was talking, I checked in with my children, and who are deeply distressed, as I think young people are across the United States. And so if you're a parent, you got a kid in some other part of the country, call them up, exchange observations. People have been getting onto sites on the web, which is a very good, vigorous way for people, very good way for people to communicate. Some of the things people have been telling us at ABC News, at abcnews.com, after today, nothing changes. Sorry, everything changes. Nothing will ever be the same. The way you've lived your life, enjoyed your freedom, your very personal expression, it all changes after today. From someone else, only a month ago, I laid on a bench outside the World Trade Center and marveled at what man could create, looking up at those 110 stories, and now I stare in disbelief at what man can take away. I want retribution, said one person to abcnews.com, and that's a sentiment that has been widely, deeply expressed in the heart of the political establishment in Washington and by people in every walk of life across the country. And as George Stephanopoulos and Leon Panetta, the former White House Chief of Staff, have made very clear, and as the President clearly knows already, one of the things the President has to do is be patient and understand who it is who did this before the country can do anything by way of retaliation. Here's a slightly chilling one. If they can pull off an act like this, they are certainly capable of eventually sending nuclear weapons this way. And this is very interesting. How can people keep calling it the modern Pearl Harbor? At least we knew who we were up against back then. Of course, the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese was a surprise to a great many Americans in the middle of afternoon ball games. This is the first time today that Major League Baseball has ever canceled all its games since D-Day, the invasion of Normandy in World War II. And one of the enormously frustrating things for the intelligence establishment, for the political establishment, for all of us in the country today, not to mention anyone else in the world who was a friend of the United States, perhaps even a foe, is to understand who it was who actually did this. And the reverberations from this are indeed global. Air traffic, we already know, listening to Lisa Stark and our own reporting earlier today, is snarled around the world, especially in Europe. The impact of what happens there in terms of transportation and commerce. The stock exchange was closed today. It all has an effect somewhere else. Any place there is a proposed mass gathering, in many parts of the world, they are rethinking it. In Germany, they have now canceled the Frankfurt car show, which is one of the biggest car shows, if not the biggest car show in the world. There's some consideration to canceling the Oktoberfest, the great beer and culture festival in Munich in Germany. France has called a general security alert, and I'm just told that Ted Koppel is with us in London live. Ted has been in London and now can go even further than that, please, Ted, on telling us what's happened in Europe and as much as you know elsewhere.
Well, I must tell you, Peter, I've spent the better part of this day trying to get from where I was, which about 12 hours ago was in Italy, to where you are. And as you well know, and as you've been reporting for much of the day, getting into the United States from overseas is a very difficult task indeed. But it's just about, what time is it here? 2:15 in the morning here in London. And some of the early editions of the newspapers have come through, and I thought you might like to take a look at them. Let me hold them up. There's not a great deal that differentiates the tabloids today from the more serious newspapers. You can see it: Apocalypse, New York, September 11th, says the Daily Mail. Declaration of war, says the Daily Express. And then this one, which perhaps goes farther than it might: is this the end of the world, from the Daily Star? And so it goes. The Mirror, War on the World, The Sun, The Day That Changed the World. And now one of the more serious newspapers, The Independent, and again, the same horrific pictures that we have been seeing all day long. And The Independent says, Doomsday America, the times of London when war came to America, and so it has gone. And I must tell you, Peter, the only thing I can tell you is, as you know, when we're overseas, American tourists tend to turn to folks like us, expecting that we know something. I'm afraid I knew less than they did. It was some other tourists who informed me earlier in the day of what had happened, and I went rushing back to my hotel room and packed while I was watching the television scenes that you have been reporting on all day. And all I can tell you is that this was a day when, as soon as people found out you were an American, they turned to you with expressions of grief, expressions of horror, expressions of outrage, and an offer to do anything they could do to help, which in my case meant getting a little bit closer to New York or Washington. Peter?
Ted, have you managed, I totally sympathize with what you've gone through today, and as bad as a day it is for many Americans, I understand what you mean when you say it's been a good day to be reminded that people around the world admire and sympathize with America and suffer with it. Can you give us some sense, if you have any whatsoever, just from looking at the reporting there, as to how governments are responding as well as individuals?
Well, again, Peter, and you've been in this situation often enough to be sympathetic to it. I literally just landed in London. We had to charter from Paris to get over here because flying into Heathrow wasn't that easy, especially at this time of night. And have only landed now and been reading the wires in the car coming in. And I do know that Tony Blair has expressed strong condemnation and, of course, a sense of oneness with the United States. Perhaps, Peter, the most interesting thing that I've heard and just read a little bit of a transcript of a television newscast that came out of Tehran earlier this evening is that the Iranian president, Khatami, is quoted by Iranian anchors earlier this evening as expressing his outrage and offering to help in any way that he can against this form of worldwide terrorism. Coming from Iran, that is quite remarkable, as I'm sure you know.
I do indeed, though perhaps a little more understandable coming from President Khatami, who is regarded as the president of Iran, who, as you well know, is trying to move the country closer to some kind of sense of democratic representation than others in the country are willing him to do. But I think we've all known for a long time that sometimes elements within the Iranian political establishment or on the edges of the political establishment operate in ways that other parts of the political establishment are not aware of. At any rate, I won't...
Right. But no, go ahead, Peter.
No, I was just going to say, I don't want to impose on you anymore, because I know you want to, I know, like anybody else arriving on scene, you want to sit down and get as much as you can. So please come back to us at any time that you want. You want to add something now?
Just one thing, and I realize compared to what everyone has been going through in the United States today, and especially the citizens of New York and Washington, this seems like a small thing, but I'm sure it was reflected today thousands, if not tens of thousands of times. Being overseas and picking up the phone, I've got 3 youngsters, as you know, who live in New York City. Just trying to get through on the phone today could be such a trial. And 2 of my youngsters, 3 of them actually, work down in downtown New York. And all I can tell you is you stop being a newsman real fast, and all you want to do is be a father and find out that the kids are all right and that everything is okay. And for so many, many people today, Americans around the world, still wondering at this late hour what's happened to their loved ones. All I can tell you is the grief and the sympathy of the world goes out to all.
You're absolutely right, Ted. And as a man, as I just said just before we joined you, just got off the phone with at least one of his kids, and the other is trying to call him. I totally appreciate it. We'll let you go to work. Please come back anytime that you feel like it with news from overseas. But as Ted indicates, when he holds up the tabloids, sometimes known as the popular newspapers and the more serious broadsheet newspapers in Britain, they all have those same headlines that this strike on America has somehow changed things. And it's not as if the United States, in the wake of Oklahoma City, was not aware that it could happen on the American mainland. But they use phrases like apocalypse now in the movie sense, among other things, and just make you realize how deeply this is felt and what impact it's had in other parts of the world. It's interesting that several, well, it's interesting in a very minor way, that several people today have noted the oddity of the date, 9th day of the 11th month, as the 3 digits of the emergency number 911. George, I'll be with you in a minute, George Stephanopoulos. We've kept John McCarthy at the Pentagon, who's been frustrated, John, I think, a little because they forced you to stay. Have they forced you to stay where you are and will not let you get into your normal listening post inside the Pentagon?
That's right. The security around the Pentagon is extreme. We have been allowed to get cameras a little closer on a very restricted basis, Peter. That was where we were able to take pictures of some of the bodies lined up outside the Pentagon, some of the grim evidence. You were talking about people worrying about their loved ones. Well, calls are going out from the Defense Department tonight of those bodies that have been identified. There are still many, many missing in the rubble of the Pentagon, so that search goes on tonight. You may notice behind me there are still fires burning on the roof of the Pentagon. They have been struggling all day to put out these fires, and they have moved along the rim of the Defense Department, and they break through. The firemen go up on the roof in very heroic efforts. They break through the roof. It breathes air, and that gives the fire new life, and then they pour water down those infernos as they burn. So the fight is still continuing here at the Pentagon to try and bring the fires under control so they can go after those people who are still trapped in the rubble.
John, we're looking at a second graphic. We had one earlier today which appeared to show that the depth or the width of the tragedy, not to mention the depth into that inner courtyard. And you described the great gash across the building as being, I think, about 200 feet wide. Is my sense tonight that fire has spread to places where you didn't anticipate it was going to spread earlier in the day?
There are fires that have spread along air ducts and along the very top attic section of the Pentagon, well beyond where the actual gash was. But Peter, the destruction, as the plane hit the Pentagon at an oblique angle, it dumped some of the fuel, apparently, in an explosive blast in one direction, and the damage is far, far worse on one side of the gash on the Pentagon than it is on the other.
And it looks to be the side on the right to our eye here. Am I right about that? Looked at from your perspective?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
John McCarthy, thank you very much indeed again. We're going to stay in the Washington area now because Claire Shipman, the House Intelligence Committee has just had a briefing, and I believe that Claire, you've managed to get a briefing from someone in the Intelligence Committee to tell us what went on.
News.
Hang on a sec, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can, now go ahead.
All right, sorry, trouble with my sound tonight. What we were told from Democratic and Republican leadership sources on Capitol Hill is that they had a briefing, an intelligence briefing, a little bit earlier today from members of the intelligence community, including the CIA, and that they were told, quote, the CIA had some hard facts, and of course this won't surprise you, that were pointing to Osama bin Laden. In fact, the source told me they were surprised how blunt the CIA was with them at this point. We've also been told, it's interesting, Peter, even in the midst of all of this tragedy today, that there was a little bit of grumbling in Washington. Some members of Congress frustrated that they weren't hearing from the president, that the president wasn't back in Washington. But the leadership says that they absolutely understand why the president was traveling around the country today, and that they have the scene we saw on Capitol Hill earlier of bipartisanship was not an act, that it's very genuine. The leadership was briefed 4 times by Vice President Cheney earlier today. They didn't hear from Bush directly, but they were very happy with what they heard from him tonight. They're planning to convene tomorrow to pass a piece of legislation condemning all of the terror, and then it's not clear whether or not they're going to stay in session. They're trying to decide how much sense that makes and how appropriate it is.
Okay, thanks very much, Claire. We'll come back. We'll come back to you as the evening wears on. I know there are people in the country who will express this sentiment, so I express it as much on behalf of other people. We believe at this point we knew absolutely nothing in advance, and we've said that several, if not several dozen times today, and here we are within minutes, I shouldn't take that back, within hours of an incident involving terrorists about which we've heard much, not much throughout the day, and already we have someone in the Intelligence Committee, or maybe it's through a member of Congress, pointing the finger at Osama bin Laden. I'll turn to George Stephanopoulos to talk about this a little bit, and then perhaps to talk to our defense analysis in Washington in just a moment. Tony, the skeptics just say, oh, they point the finger at Osama bin Laden.
Because it's easy, and we need a face.
Exactly.
We need a face.
We need someone to demonize.
And someone to blame, and someone to demonize, and someone to attack. And I think there'll probably be some grumbling from the Central Intelligence Agency and others in the intelligence community that information like this was frankly leaked out of the House Intelligence Committee or out of the Congress, because that's one of their big complaints consistently with the Congress. Is one of the reasons we can't trust the Intelligence Committee with this information is because the minute we talk about it, it gets out in the public domain. But I do think it does speak to something that we'll see happening in the coming days.
Before you go on to the coming days, I apologize. Don't want to hold you up except this. Do you think, from your experiences in government, that there is a tendency to blame Osama bin Laden even when there is not necessarily any basis on which to precisely point the finger at him? I don't mean that Osama bin Laden gave money to someone in the country, but within hours of this, we're beginning to point at the same man we point to in almost every instance.
I would say a tendency to find a specific target that you can blame as quickly as possible, not necessarily Osama bin Laden. But I remember very well in early 1993, after former President Bush, there was an assassination attempt against him. Right. The FBI and the CIA spent several weeks trying to find out who was responsible. They finally did identify people, but there was an awful lot of pressure from the people on the ground, especially to say, yes, 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 we have it. And you felt that a lot of people further back in Washington were saying, are you sure?
Yeah, I think the public is pretty actually wise about this now, because we've been through so many experiences where we thought it was Iran, and maybe it turned out to be Libya. We thought it turned out to be Libya, and then the suspect was Syria, and it turned out to be Palestine. Thought it was Palestinians, and it turned out to be an American.
And one other thing, not to discount, Peter, I'm not suggesting this is happening in this case, but you always have to be careful. Those who are doing the briefings may have an agenda of their own within the government trying to build pressure for an action they want.
Now, you were going to, before you go on to your other point, Claire Shipman mentioned that they were going to pass legislation tomorrow, which will be national legislation respectful of the day.
And support for the president.
And support for the president and support for the various government agencies. There's going to be quickly going to be a demand and request for doing something more than already, and money.
For much more. And whenever you have these kinds of terrorist acts, whether it was Oklahoma City or the assassination attempt on President Bush or the Khobar Towers Congress acts, remember, after TWA Flight 800, we first got those questions that were asked of every air passenger. Have your bags been with you at all times? And has anyone else, have they ever been out of your sight? That was never asked before. You'll see something far more stringent, I would guess, coming onto Congress now. Far more attempts after the Oklahoma City bombing. There were attempts to increase the FBI's wiretapping capabilities and tracing gunpowder and other kinds of ammunition, and also after Al-Khobar, more money for intelligence. You'll see that coming out of the Congress.
But you make a very good point, and we discussed it a little earlier today. I forgot, I think it was James Woolsey we began talking to, and pointing out that how important it is for Americans at the moment to appreciate freedoms in the country. And I think it was somebody very early in the day who quoted Edmund Burke when he talked about ordered liberty, because there will be pressure in some communities in pursuit of international terrorism to make it tougher for Americans to enjoy all of their freedoms. Do you believe that?
No question about it. After Oklahoma City, there was even an attempt to start to catalog these domestic militias in a way that we would have never done before that, and that was something, there was an outcry at the time, but I would suspect that after something like this, people will say, we're willing to sacrifice some liberties in order to get the security.
Okay, thanks, George. Please don't go away. We want to go back downtown to hear one more time from Diane Sawyer, and I say one more time because if you think about it, she has been up longer and working longer on this story than any of us. It was late in Good Morning America when this happened, and Diane, I know you need in some way, at least I think you do, prepare for tomorrow. So why don't you just take some time now and tell us about the day from your perspective.
I will, Peter, and we will be back on in the morning very early. And of course, I know you're going to be going along through the night too, so we'll probably pass the torch sometime in the middle of the night. I want to tell you what we just did.
We decided to make our way as close as we could get to ground zero, and I can now report to you that I've seen what's going on inside if you go all the way up and inside. At the scene itself, where the Twin Towers were, one tower completely level. I saw no signs of fire there now. It is a truly eerie scene because, of course, there's no light, there's no electricity, and you see silhouetted firemen, silhouetted EMS workers, everyone moving around, and in unbelievable conditions because the soot is up to your ankles, you're tripping over piping. There are those horrible, grotesque sculptures of the burned out cars and the burned out buses all around you every place. The other building, the other tower building, there seems to be the base of it still standing. They're still spraying it with water all the time, although they told me they're going to really wait for daylight to do much more. Then we went over to building 7, which also burned and burned later in the afternoon. And over there, you're hearing the crumbling sounds. It almost sounds as if you're going to have a rock fall or a landslide or an avalanche because the building is creaking and moaning as it continues to crumple. Now, there was still fire. I couldn't determine exactly where it was. I didn't know if it's that Marriott hotel or not. We saw flames still going up in the air, but it was impossible to determine from where we were exactly what that fire is right now. And Don Daler fanned out in a different direction. I'm going to bring him in once again to see what you saw, Don.
Well, I just a moment ago saw a doctor in full medical scrubs walking from the direction of the scene, and I asked him, was there anybody that he even got to work on down there? And he said no, that they didn't have any victims or injured people who were coming out to the triage area. So either the people who were injured have been brought out and are already at the hospitals, or there's nobody coming out right now. And that just now happened.
You think you saw a K-9 unit deploying as well?
We saw a K-9 unit, and we heard reports that there were some Metro workers trapped somewhere down in that area. And also there was a 911 cell phone call, a report of a 911 cell phone call from a Philadelphia area code that was traced to the region, to the area down near the Marriott Hotel. But we are, in the next couple days and hours, certainly we're going to hear probably as many tragic stories as you saw leaves of paper, but one of them was a fireman who just came by moments ago, did not want to go on camera. He was down there very early in the day and had actually witnessed one of his fellow firemen killed by a falling body, by someone who had jumped from the building.
Unending tragedy. The firefighters working down there now, the grit in your eyes makes it almost impossible to see. The soot is absolutely everywhere still. And we talked to you before, Peter, about the fact that all of these documents, I cannot tell you what it is like to see this sea of financial documents every place. And I just picked up randomly a couple of them, and they're analysis of someone's budget, and then there's an analysis of an insurance filing, and you just keep thinking how important all of these seemed to someone 24 hours ago.
Well, Diane, thank you very much indeed for your work today. It goes without saying we value enormously. As you were talking, I was also trying to catch up to the ripple effect of this thing. We know that aircraft are grounded. Lisa Stark told us a short while ago that aviation authorities and various other governmental authorities are discussing whether or not this freeze on air travel in the country is going to last as long as the original 12-hour delay they put in it, because among other things, Postal Service officials are now saying that mail is only going to be delivered within 600 miles of its point of origin for at least the next 24 hours, because mail going beyond 600 miles goes by a commercial carrier, and that's surely one of the things the government is talking about at the moment in terms of the interruption of national and, one could argue, international life at the moment. ABC's Betsy Stark, who covers the stock market, national business affairs, and international business affairs, is with us at the moment. Betsy, put together for us, if you will, the picture of a world, or much of the world, that has been brought to a halt in many ways by these incidents today.
Well, Peter, we're certainly reminded that we have a global economy and global markets. European and Latin American markets had a chance to respond to events today. As you know, U.S. financial markets were closed all day, but markets in Europe and Latin America were down sharply. Trading was halted in some of them. Asia is now having its first opportunity to react to these events, and in Japan, the Nikkei is down around 6.5%. It's been open for about an hour and a half now. Incidentally, incidentally, that's the lowest level in 15 years. You know, the U.S. has been the world's real economic engine, and the U.S. is, as you know, the economy has been faltering, but this additional blow to those very visible symbols of the United States as the center of world finance has shaken investor confidence, and we're seeing that play out in global stock markets.
Now, all financial markets are going to be closed again tomorrow. The New York Stock Exchange, the American Stock Exchange will be closed tomorrow.
That's right, Peter. Incidentally, you were talking before about parallels to World War II. Interestingly, U.S. financial markets will be closed now for 48 hours. It's the first time since World War II that that's happened. And keep in mind that the New York Stock Exchange is just a few blocks from the World Trade Center Twin Towers. So in a sense, it's not surprising. It's going to be a while before rescue operations and cleanup operations make it possible for New York Stock Exchange employees to return to work. Having said that, Treasury Secretary O'Neill, who's in Japan today, no word yet on when he will return, certainly trying to reassure everybody, saying the U.S. economy is strong and resilient. We had the Fed issuing messages today saying it will do what must be done to make sure that money continues to flow through the U.S. economy and to make sure the banking system continues to run smoothly, which it did by and large today.
In fact, the global economy and the greater number of stock exchanges in many more places makes 24-hour trading with or without the, well, to some degree, with or without the New York and the American stock exchanges today more possible, does it not?
Yes, it does, Peter. You know, one of the things I wanted to mention to you is there were economists talking today about the possibility that this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, that this might be the event that tips the U.S. economy into recession. I mean, think about it. When markets don't trade, when planes don't fly, when businesses shut down, as we saw so many do today, when malls close, that's a drag on the U.S. economy. People aren't out there spending, and when you've got an economy that's growing at a snail's pace, those kinds of, that kind of slowdown in the economy just for a period of days has the potential to push an economy teetering on recession over the brink.
Thanks very much, Betsy Stark, who will continue to report the economic dimensions of this. You know that so many, you know, largely depending on where you live, I guess, that many of the government and both federal and state offices around the country are closed today. Ironically, the Texas governor granted a 30-day stay to an inmate who faced execution tonight after the worst terror attack in American history, at least on American soil. In Georgia and in many other states around the country, the legislatures ceased doing business if they were in session at the time. And reflecting what we saw on Capitol Hill, maybe we could get that piece of tape up again for people who didn't see it. It was a very moving national moment when members of the House and the Senate stood together and sang spontaneously or not, God Bless America. The Emmy Awards, television's highest awards, which were scheduled for Sunday, next Sunday, have been postponed immediately, and so have another series of awards. There's a whole list of everything that has been postponed or delayed. And when Betsy Stark talks about the Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill, who's been saying to the country and the world for the last couple of days, as has the President, that he expects the economy to come back by the end of the year, it is part of an important psychological process as well as a business one to say to the rest of the world, as Senator Tom Daschle did when he talked about Congress will be open for business tomorrow. And that has been reasserted as a government theme at both the state and the federal level throughout the day. And so this scene on the steps of the Capitol building tonight, just as the sun was going down, was very, very moving.
From the mountains to the prairies to the ocean, wide we roam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
We're sometimes pretty cynical or skeptical about politicians, but there is an example of politicians doing what politicians are supposed to do, which is to give their constituents, all of us across the country, some sense of leadership. We're joined now by Pierre Thomas, who covers the FBI and the Justice Department for us. And Pierre, it's early days, but I gather they've got the tiniest direction to go, at least in one of the investigations.
Yes, Peter, we're being told by sources that the FBI has begun to execute a number of search warrants, including in the state of Florida. My source will not give me additional information at this particular time. He emphasizes that it is at the very earliest stages of the investigation. This may turn out to be nothing, but the search warrants being executed are based on the passenger manifest. They have taken some of the names off of the manifest, and they're going to search some of the homes to find if additional clues.
So these are people we believe, or at least we believe the FBI believes, are living in the United States?
Absolutely. These are some of the names that came up on the passenger manifest. They are going to their homes, conducting searches, looking for paper, any kind of information that might lead to answers to why this happened.
We do believe, Pierre, I think from earlier, that one of the stewardesses, one of the flight attendants, my apologies to stewardess, flight attendant, a flight attendant on the American Airlines flight was able to communicate to her base or to somebody else which seat one of the terrorists was sitting in. Does this contribute to the investigation now?
It does, Peter, and a number of sources told me tonight that a number of passengers and flight attendants were able to dial 911 and also reach some of their relatives. And they describe a pretty horrific scene, scenes of people being attacked, in some cases being stabbed. And one source said he could only imagine the horror of what was going on some of those planes.
Okay, Pierre, thanks very much. Pierre Thomas, who covers the FBI and the Justice Department, who says it's moving, at least in terms of the investigation, and we've known since the last 12 hours of this massive coming together of intelligence operation. And John McCarthy, let me ask you about the National Security Agency, which has the technical... You there, John? Jack?
I'm here.
I can't see you nor hear you.
Well,
okay.
I'm here.
Okay, thanks very much. Not you, it's our inability to see you. The National Security Administration, the National Security Agency, rather, which tapes so much stuff. Just tell us what basically they do that's fairly common knowledge, and what will they be doing tonight?
They have the ability to sweep up. Imagine a huge vacuum cleaner. All of the communications that are going around the world, they sweep them up in a very sort of broad way, and then they look for certain phone numbers and certain things that are of interest to investigators and try and single out some of those conversations. So what they are doing is they have millions and millions of phone calls that they have sucked up into this vacuum cleaner. They have to be very careful because if it is an American citizen, there are very strict rules of the road for how you go about dealing with those kinds of communications. But they will be sorting through all of the communications that have been going from phone numbers that they have a very specific interest in, looking for clues.
Okay, thanks very much, Jack. Thank you very much. Just turn around now because Governor Pataki is here. Hi, Governor, how are you? Thank you for coming. Have you got a microphone on? And if you couldn't, would you mind going and sitting down and take George Stephanopoulos' microphone? Governor Pataki, the governor of New York, we've seen him a couple of times today, briefing in the first instance by himself and then with the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. And I am grateful, sir, as I'm sure the audience is, that you take time from pressing events at the least to come in and tell us what's going on.
Well, Peter, we're doing everything we can.
You know John Miller, by the way.
Yes, of course I know John. We're doing everything we can to try to make sure that we rescue as many people as possible, provide the services to those who have been injured, make sure we have the medical support staff and the emergency teams in place, and I
apologize, I'm going to interrupt you several times.
Sure.
Are you rescuing people at the moment? Because we're not certain.
We have the equipment down in Lower Manhattan right now. The city has its police and fire emergency services down there, and we've augmented it with our National Guard heavy equipment that is down there right now. I cannot say that anybody has been rescued, that anybody has been uncovered, but because the first step is to put out the fires and to make sure that the rescue workers are safe, but that's the goal.
There's some reports of people using their cell phones. In fact, John remarked on this earlier, people using their cell phones from under the rubble to communicate their location. Have you been able to get to people in those situations?
I can't say that anybody's been able we've been able to get to anybody, but I do know that every step that can be taken is being taken.
Okay, so go on with what have you been doing this afternoon and this evening?
Well, I wanted to make sure that we had the support team, and we've been working with Mayor Giuliani to augment the city's services. I also spoke with the president and the vice president, and we were getting security briefings on a regular basis. And Peter, I got to tell you that the outpouring of support from around the surrounding area, from around the country and around the world has been enormous. You know, this is a very dark day in American history, but we're going to get through it. The people's resolve is strong, the spirit is strong, and we will not allow our freedom to be taken from us.
I know you said yourself you've talked to President Bush and to Vice President Cheney. We had the impression that for a while there today, Mr. Cheney was the only person left in the White House.
No, I spoke with the president early, probably 9:20, 9:30 this morning, and he's been extremely responsive. All the help we've needed from the federal government we've gotten.
Do you need anything more? The Attorney General said that they were sending in some different kinds of emergency teams to New York. Does that mean you are in real need at the moment?
Right now, all the needs that we've been told about have been met. But as we go forward, this is not going to be a one-night or a one-day effort. This is going to go on for days and weeks. And the emergency forces that are there are going to need relief. We're going to have to rotate teams in and out. We're going to need specialized teams. And that's why we're very grateful that we have had this support from the federal government, from the surrounding governors, and from everybody pulling together.
John?
We're hearing the first reports of people being rescued at the scene, but you know, there's a couple of ironies here. Your office, the governor's office, used to be in the World Trade Center.
That's right.
At another time not long ago, you would have been there today.
That's right. And we still have a lot of state offices there, and I have a number of friends who were there this morning.
A number of friends who are unaccounted for even now?
Unaccounted for right now.
Which means that, in all likelihood, you probably know people who were killed in this.
We don't want to give up hope at this point. As I said, we're continuing to do everything we can to try to continue the search and rescue operations, and until everything's been done, hope is something you have to have.
Governor, how close have you come to seeing for yourself what it's like?
I've been to the hospitals. I was with, and the spirit is incredible. I was at St. Vincent's with some injured police and firefighters who were in the hospital injured, and they wanted to go back. They wanted to go back down to help their colleagues. And I was at Cabrini when we had lines of people, blocks long, on the street looking to donate blood. So the spirit of the people, the response has been not one of allowing the terrorists to frighten New Yorkers off the streets. It's been one of pulling together, showing that spirit, showing that hope. And, you know, we've seen death and we've seen destruction, but we've also seen hope. And we will get through this.
You travel through the city in pretty organized fashion at the moment. A lot of people out in the city tonight?
No, and they shouldn't be. The vast majority of the people are home, and that's where we want them. But we need to have the highways and the streets clear for the emergency services and the emergency vehicles, and they are right now.
Are all of the hospitals in the city able to cope with what's been presented to them? I recall that earlier today you were calling for doctors to volunteer, and you were calling for nurses to volunteer.
We have seen an outpouring of volunteers in the hospitals, and we've seen an outpouring of donations of blood, so that at this point, the hospitals have the supplies, have the staff, have the support to be able to deal with the crisis as it moves forward. But what's going to happen, Peter, is those doctors, those nurses are going to get tired, and we're going to need the relief teams. And we've set up a statewide system to make sure that people don't just come here, but they register, so that as we need them, we can call on them and bring them in waves to help with that process.
You and Mayor Giuliani have both gone out of your way today to say to people that they must be patient, that in time the United States will retaliate, and that's a matter for the federal government. You want to just give us your thoughts on that?
Peter, that's right. This is something where I'm confident that the president and his team and our military have the ability to retaliate and take the appropriate action, and I'm confident they will. You know, we've seen anger on the streets, and there are moments when I feel it myself, but I've also seen hope, and we have to let that anger not overcome our desire to make sure we are still a nation of laws and a nation of justice. So let the federal government deal with the terrorists, let them make the appropriate response, and let's turn our anger to constructive efforts to rebuild and to pull us together.
It's interesting, Governor. I'm not even sure you know this, but we just heard a short while ago that Kmart, its 2,100 stores in the country, are not going to sell guns and ammunition at the moment. They've taken all their guns and their ammunition off the shelves, which suggests that someone else besides yourself understands there's real anger in the community, and these are those unfortunate times when prejudice sometimes tends to boil over.
There is anger, there is prejudice, but we have to put that aside and understand that the terrorist acts that have devastated the city and frightened the country are aimed at taking away our freedom, and we cannot take away other people's freedom in retaliation. We have to be a nation of laws. Let the president, let the administration make the appropriate response, and let's turn that anger to hope, turn it to action, turn it to working to make sure that we come back as a city and as a country as strongly as possible.
You have no doubt about it, I gather.
I have no doubt about it. This city has been through an enormous tragedy today. This is one of the darkest days in American history, and it's an ongoing nightmare, but we will get through this. Our freedoms will be intact, and this city and this country will be stronger than ever.
Governor Pataki, Governor George Pataki, Governor of New York, thank you very much for coming in. Opportunity to talk to you in person. We've seen you several times today on the television. I know exactly how busy you are. Thank you, sir. Let's go back to the streets of New York and ABC's Bill Blakemore, who is downtown. All of this, of course, is at the lower part of Manhattan on the western side of the city on the Hudson River, and ABC's Bill Blakemore is there. And John, you've heard the governor say that things are pretty quiet on the street. Is that the way you find it down there? Hang on, Bill. Hang on. Can't hear you just yet. Hang on. My apologies. Give us one of those 1, 2, 3s, if you wouldn't mind.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you very much. Now I hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Peter, now?
I can, Bill. Go ahead.
It's very eerie down here in the financial district, Peter. We're just slightly north of the wreckage. The electricity is out everywhere, so we're only able to see things by the very harsh floodlights that have been brought in a few places. There's still smoke billowing out of the wreckage and out of 1 or 2 buildings right next to it. We understand the Marriott Hotel is still on fire. They're pouring water on where they can. But within the past hour, firefighters have told members of our ABC News team that it's clearly going to be morning before they can begin to move any of these hundreds of volunteers, firemen, other rescue workers in to begin to try to make something of it. People who have been right down next to the base of what was the trade towers say there's virtually nothing left, maybe a few flights of stairs, a few stories of one of the buildings, but that when they came down there was so much melting and so much demolishing of any kind of structure that they cannot imagine much being left or much hope of finding anybody alive, though search and rescue is being mounted. We've seen dog teams being brought into position. There are hundreds of firemen just to the west of me here over on the West Side Highway, and dozens of fire trucks and police cars ready to move in. But for the moment, mostly it's just trying to get the temperature down at the base of where the trade towers were and to get the rest of the fire stopped.
And Bill, one knows from past experience that a huge amount of heavy equipment is needed in the area in order to continue the searching operation. Do you see it showing up?
Indeed, we've seen every now and then fleets of bulldozers and other heavy equipment moving through the back streets here. In the dark as it is just now, every now and then a fleet of flashing lights and sirens will go by as the people working on the strategy here are trying to figure out how to get these pieces of equipment into position for what they're going to have to do in the morning. But we can see that it's clearly going to be many days of a great deal of grim work to try to take it apart and to do what they can for anybody that they can find alive. But it's going to be morning before we can really see it.
Thanks very much, Bill Blakemore. One of the things that people who aren't familiar with this part of New York may not fully appreciate is that the trade towers stood, emphasis on stood, very close to the Hudson River. And the West Side Highway, which comes down the west side of New York, past the World Trade Center, and then tucks around and goes up towards, that's Brooklyn, in the map over to the right and across the Brooklyn Bridge and towards the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. The World Trade Center are very close to the edge of the river, and all that stuff right underneath the World Trade Center at the moment is basically landfill. And so there is a very narrow physical window through which the relief operators can work. Here's the mayor.
Than we need at this point. We're very grateful for it, and it'll be stored in areas, and probably over the next 2 or 3 days we will need it. And we'll do everything we can to support the efforts of the people who are trying to recover people from the debris and the horror that's taken place down there. The number to call if you have questions. I'm not sure we can answer all of your questions, but at least we can try to answer it, is 1-212-560-2730. That's 1-212-560-2730. 560-2730. If you have questions throughout the night and tomorrow, that's the number to call rather than 911, which you should just call if there is an emergency. We had over 1,100 emergency room visits today that we know of. So far, we have 6 fatalities that we know of, 5 at St. Vincent's. Obviously and tragically, there are going to be a lot more than that, but that's what we know of at this point. We had over 300 patients that were treated at St. Vincent's, over 160 at Bellevue, 250 at Beekman Downtown Hospital. And the hospital, these hospitals were probably the ones under the most stress, but they were able to get through. I want to thank all the people that helped St. Vincent's getting the water that they needed and the support that they needed. Also, I'd like to say to people that might consider doing this that services should be made available in New York City tomorrow on a fair and equitable basis. Anybody that thinks that they're going to gouge consumers or ask for extra amounts of money for food or anything else, we're going to have the police and the Consumer Affairs Department out there. So just be careful. This is a time in which we all have to cooperate and help each other. Alternate side street parking is suspended. Sanitation services will take place in most of the city, except obviously in the lower part of Manhattan, where the sanitation department will be working to remove debris, which has already started. And the schools, again, will be closed tomorrow. And hopefully we'll get them open as soon as possible. Tomorrow the effort will be at trying to recover as many people as possible and trying to clean up the horrible mess that was created by all of this. And I would ask people to cooperate as much as possible in that effort. If you have to come into Manhattan because your business is essential, then obviously do it. The upper part of Manhattan will be open. But if tomorrow is a day in which you want to stay home and stay with your family and give comfort and support maybe to other people that have been affected by this, it would be a good day to do that. Yeah, the point that Richie Shearer makes is people are wonderful, and I mean this in the best sense of the word. We've had thousands and thousands of people that have come to help us. When I was down at the site near the World Trade Center,